Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. AV. HMS Caledonia. Deep space. Adam Aries. Okay, Murray? He's a fucking ninja, but he never watches his surroundings properly, too focused on the goal. Claymore, tripwire, something like that. Force him back into it with a couple of aggressors. Or maybe lure him into it by being a tempting target. Makes sense. What about you, Vandenberg? Me? I wouldn't last 2 seconds in CQB against an aggressor. And hey, that way they could maybe live capture me, get the implants out again. Just what the hell are you boys talking about? The 5 of them turned. Hey, Kovac. Adam smiled at her. The diminutive blonde NCO in charge of biomechanics and EVA system life support gave him a friendly wave, though her attention was on her tablet. pH balance check and last QA, guys, she announced. Show me your butts. They dutifully turned around with an assortment of chuckles, presenting the life support packs that rode low on their backs and pelvises for her to assess with her tools. So what were you guys talking about? What'd we do if one of us was biodroned? Firth told her. She shuddered. Ugh, just the thought of that. I know, right? Baseball agreed. Fucking shoot me if it ever happens to me. This sparked universal agreement. So, you're basically having a who would win in a fight conversation, Kovac noted. Very macho. You're good, Firth. Yeah, but this way is practical and shit, Sykes noted. Well, don't let me stop you, she assured them, after a few seconds of silence. You're good, Burgess. Okay, Vandenberg thought for a second. Blazinski? He's too cautious for an ambush. Just gotta put the pressure on, I guess. Suppress him and work around the side, Firth noted. Okay, Warhorse then. Kovac giggled. Sniper round, from long range, she suggested. You're good, Rebar. Everyone nodded, muttering variations on the theme of, oh yeah. Hey, Adam objected. No, she's right, dude. No way I'm confronting your ass up close. Yeah, but dude, from extreme long range, Vandenberg added. Come on, I'm not an aggressor. Take it for the compliment it is and move on, brother, Baseball suggested. Gee, thanks, Adam rolled his eyes. Shame to ruin that face, though, Kovac teased. You're good, Ares. Same goes for you, Base, Vandenberg said. Get some Jets guy to do it from 1,000 yards. Damn straight, Burgess agreed, and exchanged a fist bump with him. What about the Major? Firth asked. Major Powell? Adam asked, still trying to ignore the comment about his face. Kovac had a knack for making his ears go red, though right now they were mercifully hidden under the collar and neck sheath of his Eve mass. What other fucking Major am I going to be talking about, dumbass? Right, yeah. You're good, Sykes. Airstrike, Sykes said. What? Adam asked. Airstrike, Sykes repeated. Dude, come on. Yeah, he's a fucking badass, but he's not that... Nah, bro, Baseball interrupted. It's not about him being too scary, though he fucking is. It's about giving him a proper send-off. You're right, Adam agreed. He deserved nothing less. Nuke the site from orbit, Firth nodded. It's the only way to be sure, Kovac finished for him. Helmets and mask on, boys. They scooped the helmets up and put them on, pushing them down firmly until they engaged with the rigid component of the seal at the back of the skull, with a sharp clank. The mask locked into place along the jawbone and mated with the suit's air supply, and to the helmet with similar mechanical solidity. The flexible rubber seal that did the rest of the work of keeping their faces protected from vacuum slid together easily and automatically. Kovac tugged the roll of duct tape she'd been wearing as a bracelet of her wrist. Seal check, she announced. This was a simple ritual. Each man carefully examined the seal of the man beside him, and announced it was good with a ringing slap to the helmet. Kovac then double-checked for him, and then applied some tape over the seal for good measure. It probably wouldn't actually do anything, but everyone felt better for it. Hat check. Good. 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 All good. She tapped to the large button on her tablet. KMP check. The spacewalkers stood and jolted in place a bit, as they used the controls on their wrists to test their kinetic maneuvering packs, and another round of good was called. And equipment. Adam helped the guys shrug on their equipment packages and make sure their loads were properly strapped on and distributed. That was his job specifically, backed up by Baseball, and he did it right. He took pride in that. Good, he declared. That's our checklist, you're greenlit. Kovac stepped back. Over to you, Vandenberg. Thanks, Kovac. She nodded and joined the rest of the techs in heading for the airlock. Rebar, being the senior NCO, was in charge of the EVA they were doing. "Righteous?" he prompted. Firth nodded and touched the side of his helmet. "CIC Righteous, we're greenlit for EVA." The reply came back in a few seconds. "Righteous, Caledonia CIC, we have you ready. Condition Amber." "Condition Amber," Firth called. "Clear the deck." One of the techs by the airlock echoed the call. "Clear the deck," and they filed out. Once it had cycled and the light above it indicated full seal, Firth nodded to the guys. They exchanged fist bumps, and he touched his helmet again. "CIC Righteous, go for doors. I say again, we're go for doors." The acknowledgement was lost as the siren hooted 5 times, giving plenty of warning to anyone who might need to dash to hit the emergency button. And then the gravity went away. So did the air, brushed at the corners of the room and held in place by a force field that swept the deck empty. They all glanced at one another, checking for any signs of distress. Everyone's suit was working fine, and they watched the huge flight deck doors push outwards, and then split into 2 halves, which both swung aside. Naked stars yawned at Adam from incomprehensibly far away, somehow made to feel close and dangerous by the fact that literally nothing separated him from them, save distance and his Eve mass. All he could hear was the faint muffled sound of his own heart, his own digestion, and the rush of air into and out of his mask past his ears. "CIC Righteous? Commencing spacewalk." "Righteous. Caledonia CIC. Have fun." "Man, we have got to get some Sound of Music or something in this shit," Basewood commented. "Vacuum's too quiet." "I hear ya. There's our box," Firth agreed. Adam's heart filled with a flight waypoint, and instructions on how much thrust to give himself, which he followed to the letter. Firth knew best when it came to EVA navigation. Caledonia threw a spotlight on their target as they got close to it. A round vehicle, the proportionate shape of a hockey puck but 20 feet across and bright blue, covered in alien labels and script. One standard Type 3 Dominion life raft. Without the light, both it and the bulk of their mothership would have been damn near invisible. The human eye had never really been designed for the lighting conditions in interstellar space, some light years from the nearest star. In fact, aside from the spotlight and the blinking beacon atop the life raft, the nearest and brightest point of light was the gravity spike that Caledonia had deployed to catch the tiny craft so that it could be brought aboard. They swung into place. As Firth set up shop notionally above the life raft to keep an eye on its velocity relative to Caledonia, Adam went with Sykes and Burgess joined Vandenberg in approaching antipodal spots on the rim of the little craft, where the 2 defenders set to work welding larger versions of their suits' KMPs to it, while the protectors held them in place. It didn't take long before Rebar reported, "Done," prompting a quiet cuss from Sykes. "Done. I owe you 50. "Damn right you do. Righteous, over to you." The 5 of them settled on the life raft and held on, as Firth took over piloting it into Caledonia's waiting flight deck. As they crossed the threshold, Firth made a satisfied noise over the comms. "Okay, Caledonia CIC. Righteous, we're in the bay. Close the doors. Warhorse, you may as well wake him up." Adam gave him a clear thumbs up and used the computer on the inside of his wrist to connect to the life raft's comms, a process which automatically shut down the stasis field within. "Hello in there," he announced. "You're being rescued by the United States Air Force." They'd gone over that one a few times, how to begin that introduction. In the end, they decided that any humans in such a life raft would probably have been in there for long enough to not know who the SOR was, and aliens wouldn't know the difference anyway. And seeing as Adam himself was still, after all, a para-rescueman. "Before we pop the hatch," he continued, "we just want to warn you guys that we're humans from Earth, so if there's any special precautions you need us to take to protect you from harm, you let us know." A male voice answered in definite untranslated English as the doors finished closing behind them, though there was a rough edge to it, like he had a throat infection or something. "No need, pal. We're American." Adam grinned inside his mask when he heard a feminine exclamation of disapproval in the background, and the male voice clarified, "All right, 2 Americans and 1 Canadian." "3 humans," it broadcast on all channels, and the guys all held up a fist in celebration. "Jackpot. You all okay in there?" 3 cases of recent vacuum exposure. We really need a doctor, fella." Adam waved at Baseball, who gave him a thumbs up. "Copy that. Sit tight, folks. We'll have you out there in a minute." He switched his broadcast channel. "Caledonia Medical? Warhorse, do you copy?" "Warhorse, Caledonia Medical, loud and clear. Life raft contains 3 human wounded, 0 echo tangles. 3 cases of recent vacuum decompression, probable pulmonary edema, embolism, and DCS, possible pleural effusion. Baseball unable triage, ventilation on standby, please. Wilco, Warhorse. So, stand by for lunar gravity." Adam swung himself out from the life raft at arm's length, and together they fell gently onto the deck at 1/6 of a G. Pressure returned with a thump, and as soon as the raft was down on the deck and safe, the gravity ramped up to 1 G. 2 lights over the main flight deck doors turned green. 2 on the board, Firth announced, no longer needing the radio. Rebar? We good to break seal. Clear to break seals, Vandenberg acknowledged. Get him off, guys. Adam got his helmet off as fast as he could, and hit the door release even as the first of Caledonia's medical staff came squeezing through the airlock onto the flight deck with trolleys and life support equipment. The occupants were in a bad way. The fit-looking tan dude in the back had badly bloodshot eyes, but seemed to be breathing fine. The whipcord athletic blonde woman to his right was coughing pink froth, but most worrying of all was the young Asian woman in the front. She was barely moving, and he could see clear signs of shock. Shit, you guys weren't kidding about the medical attention, he said, and hauled himself in with them. You should see the other guy, the blonde told him. Ha, bueno. He turned back out of the door, using the excuse of talking to the people outside to cover prepping a dose of anesthetic. The Chinese girl was going to need to go on life support immediately, and for that she needed to be asleep. Not for the first time, he wished that they were authorized to use Crew D for first aid. Base, get the blonde patient, she looks odemic, he instructed. Rebar, I'm gonna need that board there. Vandenberg nodded and stepped smartly to retrieving it, so he returned his attention to the Chinese girl. Hey, can you try and grip my hand for me? He asked her. Though she was able to raise her hand and sort of grip, there was nothing there in terms of strength, but she was so focused on the task it was simplicity itself to give her the shot with his other hand. She didn't seem to notice. Okay, that's fine. He accepted the board from Vandenberg. I'm just going to get this board under you. We'll get you taken care of, alright? She nodded weakly as he maneuvered her gently onto it, and he realized she hadn't actually spoke yet. What's your name? She frowned. Apparently the anesthetic was kicking in. I'm Zhu Chang. Adam didn't allow his surprise to show. Of all the people he could have pulled out of a life raft, he found Regari's friend. Besides, her breathing was definitely too laboured for comfort. There was fluid on her lungs, and that needed to be gone sooner rather than later. Surprising coincidences could be handled later. Nice to meet you, Zhu, he told her, as he lifted her easily down from the life raft and onto the waiting trolley. And you? She was definitely falling asleep now. What's your name? He took her hand comfortingly. I'm Adam. Staff Sergeant Adam Aries, USAF Pararescue, he replied. He was pretty sure she was asleep by the end of the sentence. Right. Let's get that chest drain in, he told the medics. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. The Arabian Sea, Earth. Biodrone. It would have been easy to lose track of the MV Narsapur without care and attention to detail. The ship was not large, and its running lights were just one of many visible across the open leagues of calm sea. Perfect sailing weather. If there was one thing a biodrome was extremely good at, however, it was sustained attention to detail. The humanoid at one's being could never have summoned the willpower or focus to stare at one target for hours on end, blinking only when biology demanded it. He would have shivered, or grown bored, or sought conversation. He would have stretched his legs, or relieved the insistent pressure in his bladder. Insofar as biodrones could be said to have desires of their own, it might have wished to receive an order to stretch his legs, or urinate. No such order was forthcoming, and until a controller deigned to pay it any attention, no such order would be forthcoming. All that it had, therefore, was the data provided to it by the ghost of a personality, lacking anything functionally resembling willpower or agency. That ghost was interrogated often, when the biodrome was required to blend in. Had it been striving to blend in, the biodrome would have used that information to justify stretching his legs and urinating. But it had received no order to blend in, and so it did not. The order it had received was to watch the ship they were approaching, and so it did. No provision had been made for it to hand off this duty to another biodrone so that it could stretch his legs or urinate, and so it did not. The controllers had not left it with the autonomy to make these decisions for itself, and this was wise of them. If they had, the ghost of his personality would have responded to what had happened to him in the only sane way. It would have screamed, and screamed, and screamed. The MV Narsapur was mercifully close. Soon, a controller would make contact and issue an order to prepare for combat. Insofar as the biodrome was capable of looking forward to something, it was looking forward to that order. Urinating had a clear logical role to play in battle preparations. Relief was only one legitimately interpreted order away, and that order was imminent. Until then, it watched the MV Narsapur. There were 10 of them, biodrome bodies collected from around the geopolitical region collectively known as Middle East. The concept of being in the middle of the direction of prograde was nonsense, but the biodrome was not granted the autonomy to ponder that absurdity. Many more biodromes have been assembled from all across this irrationally named region, but the 10 in this boat were all, for lack of a term that more accurately and satisfactorily encompassed them, soldiers. Fighters, perhaps. Men whose lives had left them proficient in the use of weaponry, though each for very different reasons. 1 or 2 were soldiers indeed, the volunteer agents of a legitimate state's legal monopoly on controlled violence. Others had first raised a gun to protect themselves and their families, and never found an opportunity to put it back down. The rest had taken up arms for religious reasons, that the drone's programming simply was not equipped to understand, even if it had been granted leave to try. The order came, and the biodrome rushed to a bay over the side of the boat, which took a good minute or 2. Parameters flooded in as it did so, data about the layout of the target ship, how many men were on board, their armament and training, their exact locations, the location of the cargo they were protecting. The drones conferred, bypassing crude language to form a network which evaluated the unique skills each one had inherited from the human it had once been, and liaised this information back to a central controller which ran a rapid fire of thousands of different simulations based on their suggestions, keeping the most successful, permutating upon them, combining them, throwing raw processing power at them until it had arrived at the most effective approach, which carried a maximal probability of satisfying all mission objectives. That approach hinged upon 2 simple truths. The first was that their vehicle was invisible to the radar of the ships trailing MV Narsapur at a discrete distance, and produced almost no audible noise, certainly not any that would be heard over MV Narsapur's own engines. The second was that biodrones were expendable. Everything was timed down to the second. Their boat pulled up alongside the Narsapur, and 3 of the biodrones boarded her, using grapples, rope ascenders, and a muscular boost from their fellows to scale the merchant vessel's curving flank. 3 more were delivered a little further forward, and the last 4 boarded the ship at its nose. Or tried to. One of the biodrones turned out to have had a higher estimation of its abilities in life than was actually warranted, and plunged into the water, never to resurface. None of the others paid any attention beyond adjusting their plan of attack to account for the loss. The drone that had needed to urinate was among the 3 that reached the deck of the prow. Theirs was simultaneously the most important part of the raid, and also the easiest. They were tasked with disrupting the ship's ability to call for help. This had to be done first, and it had to be done silently. It involved ghosting up 3 flights of stairs to a mid-level door in the ship's forward tower. An unfortunate crewman was stabbed before he even finished turning to see who was opening it. As for the radio equipment, there were 3 men in that room, none of whom were alert for danger, all of whom were bored and undisciplined. Military they may have been, and trusted, but for all their careful preparations had simply never accounted for alien activity. The third of them was dead only a second after the first, just enough time for the biodrone that entered the room first to switch aim, backed up by his fellows. The gunfire would draw attention, but instructions from the controller, followed instantly and perfectly, meant that any attempts to radio for a report or to call for distress would meet with failure. The radio wasn't turned off, it was simply turned wrong. The 3 biodrone teams went mobile. Confused sentries on the deck gasped their last, still wondering what was going on, even as 7.62mm rounds ripped through them. Panic shouting from below deck heralded the arrival of the garrison, protecting the ship's cargo, whose haste to fight back led them to blunder straight into grenade tripwire traps and ambushes. As the controller had planned, 2 of the biodrones were killed, sacrificed in distracting the defensive force long enough for their fellows to outflank and enfilade the enemy. Another was sacrificed storming into the last knot of defenders with a brick of high explosives on a 5-second countdown in his arms. The few who survived his detonation were executed before they could recover their wits. That left 6 biodrones, 2 of which were wounded. Those 2 were tasked with throwing their fallen counterparts overboard. The healthy 4 went to work with hoists, winches and trolleys, getting the loot they had come to steal up on deck. With no human left on board who had even the mental capacity to shoot at it, the spaceship that had been trailing MV Narsapur for hours dropped its cloak and lifted the cargo off the deck and into its hold. it remained visible for only 5 seconds. The biodrones had one last task. If it had been able to, the biodrone might have wished not to take this next step, but the controller had given clear instructions. Obedience was inevitable. Within it, what might have been the last shred of a human being reflected that at least he would soon be released. Words that meant nothing to the biodrone's guiding programming drifted through its head like a passing thought, concerning the soul of his body's former owner to Allah. Together, the biodrones vaulted the rail and sank. The rings of white water they made when they hit were barely worthy of comment next to the disruption caused by the merchant vessel's own wake. 20 minutes later, when a helicopter full of Marines from PNS Zolfiqua arrived in response to a failure to make routine contact, they found only the corpses of their comrades and a worrying absence of the ship's cargo. Date point: 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. HMS Shaman, HMNB Folkfer, Folkfer, Simbreen, the Far Reaches. Adam Aries. Hey Dexter, man, you are not going to believe who we just pulled off a life raft on the edge of outer space. Although, maybe you can guess because you wouldn't be interested otherwise, huh? Anyway, we found your friend Zhu. You telling Dexter? Sykes stuck his head into the tablet's camera field of view. Hey Dexter. This prompted Baseball, Firth and Rebar to join in too, and Adam just grinned at the camera as they expressed a series of happy greetings to their Gowian friend / mascot, before he finally shooed them away. Yeah, you gotta visit us sometime, man. We can do, like, a joint training thing or something. Maybe see what you've got to teach us, like that fucking pulse gun trick you pulled. That shit was insane. He cleared his throat. Anyway, yeah, we found your friend. Looks like she's been stuck in that pot for about 5 years, and they had a rough time of it, but she's alive. By the time you've got this, they'll probably have taken her back to Earth, but don't worry. I'm sure we'll be able to sort out putting you two back in touch again. Yeah, give my regards to this Aimer of yours. Guess you want to know too. And yeah, that's about it. I'll see you around, Southpaw. Peace. He stopped the recording and sent it without bothering to play it back. Regari had been in touch a couple of times since Capital Station, and Adam knew that he'd be delighted by the news. All done? Baseball asked. Adam just grinned at him. He'd saved lives. Had some good training that morning, been able to send some really good news to a friend. Good day, he commented. Yeah. Baseball had been doing that a bit for a while now. Something was bugging him, Adam could tell, but if Base didn't want to share, that was his business. He wasn't about to push it. You got anything planned? He asked instead. Baseball shrugged. Going drinking with Titan. Dude's not been late since he got shot. You? Adam exchanged elaborate handshakes and backstabs with the other three as they left. His friend Sean's coming up from Earth. Apparently his uncle's like this journalist or something, doing a bit in the Byron group, yeah? We were going to go up the lake, go for a swim. Really looking forward to that. They only just declared it clean this week. I've not been up there since before I enlisted. Oh. Something bothering you, bro? Adam asked him. Baseball stood awkwardly in the middle of his locker room, drumming his hands nervously on his thighs and licking his lips. Adam stood up. Dude, what's wrong? Baseball apparently reached a decision. Brother, you better sit your ass back down. I've got something you need to know. Date point: 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. Whitecrest Clan Enclave, City of Wee Cow, Planet Gao. Regari. Where other officers of the clan had busy offices full of clutter, keepsakes, mementos, and memories of jobs well done, Regari's was characteristically rather more Spartan. This was largely because he never used it. He was usually too busy with field work. Whitecrest was all about security on a big scale, and that meant intelligence, information, data, and the correlations and relations between those data. Most of the most important of that data crunching went on right here in the Clan Enclave, a subtle edifice of geometric shapes clad in tackwood and greenish glass, separated from the bustle of the city by Wee Cow by a low stone wall, a decorative moat, and some well-groomed parkland. It was a fittingly prestigious and understated home for a prestigious and understated clan, and its sprawling Warreners basements were full of officers doing vital, though unglamorous work. Regari, as a political officer, should not have been among them. The location of his office was a relic of the clan's disfavour, though that has softened over the years as the fathers responsible had retired, and as Regari's own influence had grown. His friendship with Gyumi had done wonders for the Whitecrest breeding program, and the fact that he was now forging bonds with a human military unit. Several of the fathers were worried, he suspected. A younger male with that kind of influence, and certainly one with as many cubs as Regari had now sired, was a threat to the established order. His immediate future was doubtless going to involve either attempted assimilation into the clan leadership, or, vastly more likely, relegation to yet another satellite position with all the appearance of prestige. Right now, though, politics ruled the day. That was Regari's job, and Regari was good at his job. Indeed, he'd become even better at it ever since discovering just how modifiable his new cybernetic hand was. Had he worn sleeves, he would literally have had some tricks up them. First and foremost of which were the petabytes of storage space and the holographic projector in his palm. His workstation was literally attached to him, available at an instant's notice. "Yolna's going to win," he declared. Father Terek, the elderly officer ostensibly responsible for supervising Regari's work, scratched at his ear with an air of skepticism. "I had thought that her attachment to the human female, just like Gyumi," he suggested. "Is much less of an issue than Mother Suri and her supporters like to believe," Regari informed him. "I had Brother Ruvi conduct a meta-analysis of the data split commentary. Most of the females just don't care, and of those who do the majority, are broadly positive." Terek inclined his head. "Positive?" "For reasons ranging from the pragmatic to the compassionate," Regari elaborated. He activated the gesture-based command in his new paw that caused it to project the files in an almost physical format above his palm. With his remaining natural paw, he could select, move, and even throw the files around. Copying them to another device was as simple as throwing them towards said device. This he did now. "That's my full report," he explained, as Terek studied and accepted the incoming file. "It details my findings, my reasoning, and my supporting evidence. Much as I like and respect Yolna, I've made every effort to remain neutral and unbiased in my assessment. And I am still convinced that Mother Suri has a negligible chance of being the next Mother Supreme." Terek stood. "I will read it in full and present it to the fathers," he promised. "Your recommendation, I take it, is to side with Yolna?" "The rest of the clan is negligible, and the potential benefits considerable." Terek made a thoughtful head duck to acknowledge Regari's point, and let himself out. Regari gave it a few minutes and toured his office. He used the time in tidying up the minimal mess and examining his few keepsakes. A crystal data wafer full of Zhu's precious collection of Earth entertainment, one of Gyumi's walking canes that she had bequeathed to him, and a framed picture, a gift from the SOR, depicting all of them gathered around him and beaming in those big, toothy Deathworlder smiles. Actual pigment printed on paper, a technology so obsolete in Garian society that it might have been an antique or relic, and obsolete by human standards too, but this one was glossy, crisp, and new. That was enough procrastination. He headed out, locked up his office, combed a bit of stray fur back into place as he jogged down the hall, and let himself into Brother Ruvi's office. Ruvi was an ally, a genuine one. A fellow victim of clan politics whose career had been simply hauled by voicing honest concern to the wrong father, he was even more fervently in favour of reform and a change of leadership than was Regari. Unlike Regari, he'd been promoted to leadership of the clan's digital security and information wing, what the Saw had called SIGINT, and, like Regari, had taken his new role and excelled at it, adapting to the demands of the job with the aplomb and rapidity that had made Clan Whitecrest's reputation. Regari didn't bother with a greeting. They'd been planning this particular sting all week. "Well?" He read the summary and then forwarded the file to Ryu, Ridilo, and Yemil. Regari sighed in relief, and Ruvi chittered. The set of his own ears was relieved, though. Terek had been the subject of an unresolved question, whether he was working with the little sister fathers who held the reins of power in Whitecrest, and were getting progressively cozier and cozier with the monolithic nepotism of the Dominion, or whether he was doing the right thing no matter what the right thing might be. Forwarding the file to three fathers who had, in Regari's estimation, successfully balanced authority with conscientiousness was a strong evidence for the latter. "Excellent," he growled. "I think we—" He was interrupted by his communicator, which cheeped at him in a 1-beep, 2-beep, 3-beep rhythm until he checked it. "Ah!" Ruvi noticed his colleague's ears prick up. "Good news?" "A message from Warhorse." "You have a human on your priority message list?" Ruvi asked. "I have 3 humans on my priority message list," Regari retorted and opened the message. 30 seconds later, his hindclaws slid and scrambled on the smooth concrete flooring, as he bolted out of the room. Date point: 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. Dementor Road, Falkfer, Simbreen, the far reaches. Sean Harvey. Do you think he's going to ask you again? Not anytime soon. We're still putting it back together, you know. Ava was nursing her coffee on the couch opposite the recliner Sean had claimed for himself. It was still hard to see her looking so relaxed and at peace in a relationship with Adam, but that wound was healing for Sean. It was clear that the two of them doted on one another, which definitely helped. If the last month or so had continued to be the same old story of neglect and frustration, then he'd have suggested calling it off, and guessed that Ava would have finally seen the light. But she'd been vindicated. Once Adam had finally seen the need to actually connect with his girlfriend, then by her own admission he'd been perfect, devoting every second they could spend together to them. He took her on dates, they enjoyed the young woods around Falford together. She was in the best shape of her life thanks to his one-on-one attention. It sounded idyllic. I thought things were going well, Sean asked her. It is, she agreed. It's just, you don't put a relationship back together overnight, even with the nice apartment and all the time we're spending together, you know. Right. All that time apart, all the changes, Sean agreed. He's not changed as much as I was afraid he would, she conceded, setting her coffee down. Sure, he's big as a bus nowadays and he's got all these skills and training, but he's still got that goofy laugh, those stupid dorky jokes. Whenever he's been romantic, it's like he's been planning it for 3 weeks, she sighed, toying with a stray curl of hair. I probably changed more, deep down. How so? Just things, you know. My way of looking at things, she shrugged. I don't know, I think... Whatever she was trying to think aloud went unthought, as the distant sound of a door slamming, and a rapid rhythmic thudding sound that grew stronger by the second. Ava grinned and stood up as what were unmistakably the footfalls of an extremely heavy man came thumping up the last flight of steps. He's Somali, that's great. That means he must have gone... Adam didn't bother with his key. The door frame and lock both disintegrated as he just swatted the door so hard that even one of the hinges broke, leaving it hanging drunkenly from the top corner. His expression wouldn't have looked out of place on an angry war deity, and Ava actually shrieked a little and took a short couple of steps back. Sean's own reaction was no less violently startled. He flinched away from the broken door and wound up having to scramble to his feet to avoid tipping over the chair arm and onto the floor. Ava had retreated even further across the room as Adam bore down on her, until her back was against the wall and she was penned in against it by the palm he smacked right down next to her head. She was wearing any expression that was the very picture of equal parts bewilderment and fright. From where he was standing, Sean couldn't see Adam's face, but he could see the rage searing in every line of those titanic muscles. For a deadly few seconds, the only sound was the creak of the last tortured hinge swaying back and forth, as Ava's face went from intimidated shock to dawning horror. Shit, she squeaked. You know. For all the fury of his entrance, Adam's voice was dangerously quiet and level. You were stupid enough to talk to baseball, he pointed out. However, Ava wanted to respond. It didn't come out except as a silent mouthing of the start of a word, and some desperate looking around, blinking rapidly as she tried to think of what to say. She cowered, and gave an involuntary terrified gasp when Adam bunched a fist and drove it into the wall so hard that the plaster caved in. Where do I start? He growled. All this time, and who? Was it this skinny shit here? He rounded on Sean, who backed away, raising his hands as if they'd do any good at warding off somebody who outmassed him a couple of times over. Adam took 3 smart steps forward, and immediately had Sean by the front of his shirt, yanking him around so hard that he heard the seams fray. You? You want to own up to this? Did you? There was no refuge save for honesty. Sean did the best job he could of straightening and looking Adam in the eye. Swallowed, and nodded. He knew neither of his head was about to go the same way as the wall and the door, nor what he might do to stop it if it was. Rather than knocking his block off, Adam just made a disgusted noise and gave him a contemptuously gentle shove, landing Sean in his backside a few feet away. He turned and stalked back to Adam, who moved out to the corner he trampled her in, and was watching him wide-eyed, hunched over and trembling, with her hands hugging her upper arms. You know what baseball said you said? He demanded. He said you don't owe me a fucking apology. What the fuck? Ava finally found her voice. Hear me out, she pleaded. This was not, apparently, what Adam had wanted to hear. Hear you out, he barked, as she backed away 2 stumbling steps as he took a pace towards her. Hear you out? Sure, I'll fucking hear you out. You got 5 seconds to explain yourself, Ava. 4, Adam, 3. It was that or break up with you, she blurted, finally finding something resembling her confidence again. She was still shaking, but there was an I'm not going down without a fight edge to it now. Adam paused in his countdown and just stared at her. For her part, Ava wrung her hands and stared right back, still trembling like a leaf but clearly determined to say her piece. You're all I have of home, she said. You and Dad... Don't you dare call him that, Adam snarled. I can't lose you, and I was going to, she forged ahead. I reached the end of my... I couldn't do it anymore. I was sending so much your way and getting nothing back, and I ran out. And it was... I had to reach out to somebody. And you couldn't fucking talk to me? Adam demanded. I did, she shot back. Every fucking time, Adam. I told you time after time, and when did you listen? You didn't. Bullshit! Adam exploded. Ava's fire was up, and looked like she was going to keep arguing, but he took another step forward. She backed into the kitchen area, and this time the poor refrigerator took the brunt of his rage, drawing a fearful gasp out of Ava, in place of the tirade she clearly wanted to unleash. I listened, he insisted. But what did you expect me to do? Go AWOL? Is that what you wanted instead? Me in prison, and all that time and pain wasted? Adam prodded her in the chest, hard. She gasped and rubbed at the bruised spot. I went through hell, and the only thing got me through was thinking you had my back, he growled. Broken bones, torn muscles, nearly drowning. Pain, day in and day out for 5 fucking years. And don't even get me started on some of the nightmares I've had because of what I've learned. He prodded her again. All having to put up with the exact same loneliness that you couldn't handle. You think all that time away from you was easy for me? And I've had temptation. Oh yeah, I have. More than a passing little devil. Do you know how easy it is for guys like me to get laid? Well, shut up! The fridge rocked as it suffered further abuse. Do you know how often I gave in? Do you know how often I thought about giving in? Then, not even fucking once! In the aftermath of that roar, Sean could have sworn the loudest sound in the room was his own heartbeat. Then Adam's finger curled back from under Ava's nose, and his head dropped. Not once! Not even once! Not once! He mourned. Not one single goddamn time, Ava. I did all of this for you, to keep you safe to... He trailed off. Ava was weeping openly now. The fear in her body language was gone. For the first time since Sean had known her, she looked ashamed. But... She put a hand on Adam's face, and he swatted it aside to glare at her again. Adam, all I ever wanted was you. Adam didn't move for a moment. Then he swayed upright, backed off, and gave her a long, slow, tearful appraisal. Right, he grunted. It's all about what you want. Adam, fuck you, Ava. I don't know what happened to you, but I never fell in love with a selfish, backstabbing whore. Adam! He spun, strode to the door, and put the last hinge out of his misery with a petulant backhand. Get out of my house, he ordered, and was gone. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. Commune of females. Weekow City, Gal. Regari. You're approaching the commune of females, Mel. Identify yourself. Regari was in no mood for games. The message from Warhorse was far too important to pass up to Ima digitally. This was a conversation, and one that he was itching to have. You can't be serious, Sister Lyra. You see me every 3rd or 4th day for a quarter of a year. It's me, he pointed out, making a beeline for the door. He nearly walked into a ceremonial fusion spear, which was suddenly charged and spitting hot while aimed levelly at his chest. Behind it, her ears were up and her eyes bright with dutiful challenge. Identify yourself, she repeated. Frustration, outrage, and the burning need to deliver his message had badly eroded Regari's composure anyway. Having a weapon leveled at him was the final insult that forced him to do something that, under normal circumstances, no sane male would have ever considered. He snarled at a female. Regari, to deliver a message to Mother Ama. Now get out of my way, you witless, parasite-infested, officious, plodding forepaw! Her spear tip lowered, and her ears rotated backwards out of sheer surprise, and, whether out of genuine intimidation, whether she had finally got her head around the urgency of his mission, she stood meekly aside after a moment's consideration. Regari swept past her. Unlike the White Crest Enclave, the commune of females wasn't a single, architecturally planned building, but several, built organically over the centuries, as the needs of the females had changed and as available funds and labour had dictated. Not that the females were ever short on either funds or labour, thanks to the thousands of attention-hungry males who lived in the city outside their walls. Still, at some point, a senior mother had declared that the entrance to the commune needed to be something both imposing and beautiful, and so an appropriately grand building, far wider than it was tall, had been constructed. From the outside, its most striking features were its sweeping white stone stairs, and the doors at their top. Huge tackwood things with borders of angular geometric silver filigree that were only ever opened for important occasions. The actual entrances were the rather more discreet, though similarly decorated frosted glass sliding doors to either side, one of which whispered open for him as he approached, and was ignored as he passed through. Impressive though it was outside, Regari had always thought that the inside of the commune's grand building was by far more beautiful. The floor was an irregular library of differently coloured slate tiles, left naturally just a little rough on their upper surface, but still smooth enough for completely unimpeded movement. Lighting was provided by hidden lamps which bounced warm yellow light up into the vault of the ceiling. At ankle height in the wall, hidden projectors sent ripples of a faintly greenish hue playing over the slate floor tiles, creating a watery effect which neatly complemented the real flowing water that rose in a fountain behind the tackwood doors, before being sent to run and chatter down twin shallow meandering channels that reached out into each wing of the building before vanishing into the walls to emerge outside and feed the ornamental ponds. Every inch of wall was trellis or bas-relief. Regari always had to take a moment to admire the hanging plants, attended by delicate little flying drones. They had been carefully chosen so that some were always in flower no matter the season, and right now the grand concourse was kissed with delicate whites and blues. Mothers and sisters were walking and chatting, sitting on the benches, reading. There was an air of tension that Regari could smell and feel in the fur at the back of his neck. Several of the nearby females glanced at him, saw a white-crest male, and probably and obviously turned away to keep their conversation private. He noticed Sister Mune watching him, and the two shared an affectionate though subtle mutual pricking of ears at one another. She had been pulled from gate guard duty for the duration of her pregnancy, though she still loitered in the concourse, as much because she loved it there as because she was, by her own estimation, about the most competent of the commune's guardian sisters. Certainly she was the strongest and most highly trained, having spent much of her adolescence blending the gun fu that she had learned from Zhu with stances and styles more appropriate for a Gauian, many of which were now part of Whitecrest training regimen. Regari had sparred with her during their courtship, and had never once managed to knock her off her feet. The young female could float and flow like dawn mist when she wanted to. Regari glanced around to quickly check whether Ima was present, then concluded that Mune had just as much right to know. "You know, Sister Layra has reported you missing," she said as he approached, laying aside her tablet. "I think you impressed her." "That may not have been wise," Regari conceded, "but this is important and she was in my way." "What's so important that you snap at a commune guard like?" Mune asked. "I mean, Layra probably wants to meet with you now, but if it had been anyone else, you—" "The humans found Shu," Regari interrupted her, ignoring that nugget of intel for the time being. Mune surged to her feet. "Shu's safe?" "They picked her up from an escape pod this morning." Much as he'd have preferred to keep the original, Regari had to admit that having a prosthetic paw with a built-in gesture-based control interface for his data was unbelievably convenient. He summoned Warhorse's message and sent it to Mune's device, which she snatched up and interrogated eagerly. She impressed and pleased Regari by reaching up to the communicator clipped to her ear and pinching it before he had even thought to ask her. "Security Central, Mother Ima has a priority message waiting on the Grand Concourse. Call for her, please. Priority message for Mother Ima, Grand Concourse." She listened to the response, then growled a little. Her contract with Regari had earned Mune some prestige, a fact which spoke volumes of Regari's own reputation, but she was still very much the junior on the security forces, and somebody somewhere was keen to keep her reminded of that fact. Nothing ever went as swiftly and smoothly as she would have liked. "It's a personal message, Central, but very important and private. Please call for her. Thank you." She sighed and unclipped the communicator, muttering a lone human curse once it was safely turned off. "Bitch." Regari chittered quietly. "Anyway, I don't know more than is in the message there, though if Warhorse thinks she had a rough time of it, I'm a little worried." "Is there any way to find out more?" Yun asked. "It's a lot easier to get a message from the Saw than to the Saw," Regari mused. Both of them pricked their ears up as they heard the commune-wide announcement for Ima. "Ima has Yule's ear," Mune pointed out, borrowing yet another human phrase. She did that a lot, peppering her language with Deathworld colloquialisms. Regari had almost begun developing the same habit, but had carefully avoided it. He had the political consequences to think about. Mune, on the other hand, seemed to have accepted that her enthusiasm for all things human was equal parts profitable and isolating. Either that, or she was too headstrong to care. True, but But Yona is not Mother Supreme yet, Regari pointed out. She may not have as much influence as you think. She's going to win, and the humans know it, Yuna retorted. She'd been a stubborn cub, and was now a stubborn and slightly naive adult. The fact that Regari agreed with her assessment was unimportant. What's that expression? About those birds you shouldn't count? Before they hatch, chickens, Yuna finished for him, deflating. You're right. But it's Shu. They both jumped a little at Ima's voice. Shu? What about Shu? Regari stood and they exchanged the nose rub of old friends. They found her. She's alive. Ima made a squeaking noise of delight and relief and sank onto the bench beside Myun, ears swiveling like robots in an assembly line as she tried to settle on the reaction. Where is she? Can we see her? I don't know yet, Regari told her. I only just got the message. She's back on Earth. It sounds like she got into more trouble. Ima nodded. That would be Shu, she agreed, then stood up again. So, we're going to Earth. Both Regari and Myun's ears flattened. You can't be serious, Myun squeaked. I have waited nearly 10 years to finally see her again, and kick her ass for running away, Ima proclaimed. I am not letting a little thing like a Class 12 Deathworld get in my way. She turned to Regari. Besides, didn't you say that the humans wanted to give you some kind of an award? Well, yes, but nobody ever mentioned actually going to Earth, Regari replied. The pollen's in the air on that planet would kill us. We can wear breathing masks. The gravity exertion suits. I've had a long time to think about this, Regari. I'm going. I would like you to come with me. Don't you have a cub to look after? Regari asked. I also have a sister who needs my help, Ima retorted. Of the two, she will need me more. The cub is nearly weaned. She's clan, Regari, Myun pointed out. What would you do if she was a Whitecrest? Regari hesitated, then ducked his head slowly. I'd already be calling for a shuttle. The females ducked their own heads, then Myun sighed. I wish I could come with you, she said. You're pregnant, Ima pointed out. I know, that's why I said I wish I could, Myun agreed. But take a message from me? Of course. I'll take a Whitecrest ship to Simbreen and arrange things, Regari said. That should take long enough for your cub to be weaned. Good. Ima scratched at her ear thoughtfully. I'll go tell Yuna she needs to do without me for a while. Ima, she's been in stasis for 5 human years, Regari said. And it was an escape pod. She may be a bit fragile. Ima just chittered. When was she ever not fragile? Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. AV. Vancouver General Hospital. Vancouver. British Columbia. Canada. Earth. Colonel Ted Bartlett. She's tough. The family were waiting outside, pacing and chewing their fingernails and desperate to be let in. Not that it would do them any good. Miss Chang was sedated and would remain so for several days. She had been jumped straight to Scotch Creek from Caledonia's onboard jump array, and had been airlifted from there to Vancouver General, still inside the stasis pod. She had arrived on an operating table that was perfectly prepared for her, and that fact had undoubtedly saved her life. The fact that she had even made it that far spoke volumes of her tenacity. Her doctor was in no mood to entertain military scientists, however. She undoubtedly is, she agreed. But I would very much appreciate knowing why I've got an army colonel in my ITU, please. Ted nodded. Dr. Spilney, I need to swear you to secrecy on a few things. This is going to be important to her care, but it's also important for, well... He handed over a tablet with a non-disclosure agreement on it. The doctor skimmed it. It wasn't long, then scored her signature and pressed her thumb to the biometric pad for good measure. Miss Chang is one of the few people we know of to survive nerve jam trauma, Ted told her, after he countersigned. Are you familiar with nerve jam at all? I heard it's some kind of alien weapon that can induce fatal seizures, Spilney conceded. It's a lot nastier than that, Ted revealed, solemnly. I'll spare you the jargon, but it works by creating a field that disrupts some specific types of quantum activity that's part of the brain's normal function. Or rather, forces it to behave a certain... He trailed off. The point is that while the effect may wear off instantly, the damage it does is permanent. Her brain is... scarred? Ted nodded grimly. Intimately. On a cellular chemistry level. Or most likely anyway. The testimony of her friends would suggest as much. Mr. Esther City and Miss Beulah had weathered the vacuum of space rather better than Miss Chang, and were both recovering elsewhere in the building. Esther City's foot was attracting prosthetic and rehabilitation specialists from all over North America. who were showing detailed footage and images of it with their colleagues overseas. By all accounts, the interface between flesh and synthetic material was ingeniously self-sterilizing and might well revolutionize the field of human prosthetics. Bartlett, as a lifelong enthusiast for science, was keeping a weather eye on that development, but it was outside of his field. To be frank, so was the case of Miss Chang, but nobody else was even half as qualified as Ted was, so... Dr. Spooney frowned at her patient, deep in thought. Prognosis? I'm not qualified to give one. Obviously, actually testing the long-term effects of Nurgen would be... unethical. Lab rats? You can't really scale up the behavior of rats to the behavior of humans, Ted squirmed. But what we suspect is that any existing psychological tendencies or predispositions are likely to be exasperated. The other thing we noted was a spike in learning retention and neuroplasticity for some time after exposure, which then tapered off to below previous levels, leaving the subjects, strongly influenced by whatever they were doing immediately after the trauma. Spooney frowned at her patient again, watching her chest rise and fall with a click, hiss, wheeze, as the ventilator did the work on her behalf. Ted gave her a minute to think, which he used to produce a copy of the research paper from his briefcase. The paper should explain more. We don't really have any advice on what you can do for her, but any observations you can make or data you can gather might help us help her and other future victims. Spooney nodded and accepted it. I'll be sure to do that. There's one last thing. Which is? Ted produced a handheld implant scanner from his briefcase. It was little more than a grey cuboid, not dissimilar to the tricorders he'd watched on Star Trek growing up. May I just lean in there and perform a scan? It's not invasive, is it? Ultrasound. Spooney just gestured to the bed invitingly. Ted leaned in past the assorted tubes, lines and leads, and pressed the scanner gently but firmly against Miss Chang's forehead. 3 seconds later, the LED on his back lit up green and he breathed a sigh of relief. While the SOR and the medical staff in Caledonia had both already checked her for alien hardware, Ted's own device was the most recent and sophisticated model that wouldn't be fooled by non-metallic implants, as had happened in the tragic case of Sarah Tysdale's murderer. Thank you, Doctor. He straightened up, pocketing the scanner. Thank you, Colonel. Ted let himself out. He didn't make eye contact with the family hovering outside, just nodded politely, touched his fingers to his brow, and made himself scarce, wishing he could do more. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. HMS Shaman. HMNB Folkvar. Folkvar, Simbrine, the Far Reaches. John Burgess. It was good movie night. Sometimes the guys wanted a good movie to counterbalance all the awful ones they liked to watch, and it was a good way to round off a mission day. The dorm was clean, they were all showered, and now there were a few hours of quiet time to lounge around in ranger shorts and watch something. Hence they were watching The Pink Panther, the old one with Peter Sellers. That had been the plan at least, right up until somebody had asked where Warhorse had got to, and John had tried to explain. And you didn't think to tell him sooner? Titan was asking, plainly angry. Man, when did I even have the chance? The movie was on pause, and the usual comfortable puppy pile on the couch had broken up into a standing argument. Sykes opened his mouth to comment, and John nodded in anticipation of what he was going to say. Okay, yeah, lots of times, but come on, man, timing. We were all on edge, Then just as I was about to tell him, he went and proposed to her. And then before he got a chance to get over that, we had the mission, And you should have told him, Titan asserted. You're supposed to be our fucking brother, man, and you're lying to Horse of all people about his girl fucking around? Sykes agreed. Firth weighed in. You two are like the bromance of this outfit. How the fuck are you gonna stand by and let Horse get joded? We're supposed to trust you with our lives, Blazinski added. That stung. It downright hurt, in fact. You know you can, John protested quietly. Do we? Because if you can help Horse's girl suck some other asshole skinny fucking dick. Say what? John ranted on Titan. I didn't fucking help her. You let her keep on doing it, didn't you? Blazinski retorted. Because the alternative was ripping Horse's heart out of his fucking chest at exactly the wrong moment, man. John illustrated the mental image with a gesticulation. We wouldn't have him if I'd done it before now. You think he'd have made it through without, at least, the idea of her? And I'm not sure I'd have made it through without him. You think it was a choice between this or no protectors at all? Rebar checked. John sighed and nodded. Could be, he agreed. Even Horse has his limits, man. The three defenders exchanged quick glances, communicating silently. "Tell me he was at least pissed at you," Phone demanded. "He was fucking furious, bro." "Surprised he didn't tie your ass in a pretzel," Titan said. "Fuck, he's gonna have a face like Armageddon landing when he gets back." "Yup," John agreed. "Yeah, well, you fucking deserve it." Sykes folded his arms. "Come on, don't be like that. It's not like I did it to help her. But you did help her, though. Lads?" Everyone looked at Murray. Murray was like that. You could completely forget he was there until he opened his mouth. And softly Scottish though his speech might have been, everyone shut up and listened. Never mind that he was the smallest of the Sword's enlisted men. He commanded attention whenever he chose to. "Let's just watch the movie." Everyone paused and settled a bit. There was a round of nods and murmured agreements, and the guys all sat back down on the couch. Baseball was left standing. Hey, let me in there," he ventured. "Couch is full, John," Firth told him, not looking at him. "Dude, I was sitting right there a minute ago. Couch is full." John directed a pleading look, first at Rebar, who was avoiding eye contact, and then at Murray, who gave him a complicated facial shrug which said, quite clearly, that he wasn't about to rekindle the argument by disagreeing, and that John was just going to have to put up with it. After a moment's hesitation, John settled for a resigned throat clear, and sitting cross-legged on the hard, cold floor next to the couch, rather than wrapped up with his buddies. It didn't feel right at all, and not even Sellers' dignified on-screen antics could fix that. They watched in silence for a little while, even managing a collective chuckle at the exchange. "If I were my father, I'd have you tortured. If you were my father, I doubt very much if I would have kissed you." The tension seemed to be just about starting to dissipate, or maybe that was just wishful thinking on John's part, when there was a distant, muffled roar of some kind, and the whole building shook as if a bomb had gone off nearby. Huge, metal-framed and reinforced as it was, they still knocked the couch over and scrambling off it, alert for danger. "What the fuck?" Firth added. "Sounded like it came from the gym." Murray aimed a thumb towards it. "Ah, shit. You don't think Adam..." He was left standing as the rest of them took off at a run. Waiting for them in the gym was a sight more disturbing than anything John had seen on Capital Station or in training. Adam's jerry can was lying at the bottom of the wall, at the far end of the gym from where it was usually kept, and had burst open, spilling buckshot all over the floor. The wall itself had a crater in it about halfway up, where the cinder blocks had been smashed in by something very heavy hitting it with huge force. The 100-pound plates were all off their racks and scattered around the gym like schoolyard frisbees. The spring steel barbell at the deadlift station, the one commissioned especially for the protectors, had bent beyond hope of repair. The one at the squat rack was now roughly the shape of a hockey stick, and Adam was sitting in the middle of the floor, curling his elbow and sobbing. Baseball was at his side in a flash. "Oh man, brother, The air rushed straight out of him, and he felt a stab of pain in his ribs as he found himself caught in the kind of crushing bear hug that might have pulped an alien and barely hurt most humans. There was nothing to do but put his own arms around his best friend's huge shoulders and hold on, rocking him back and forth. The guys all left him to it and found stuff to do. Murray, Firth and Blazinski set about cleaning up the gear, while the defenders gathered around the damaged wall and held a hushed consultation with one another. Just as the last of the plates were being racked up, Rebar sidled over and gave John a tap on the shoulder. "Dude, that was a structural wall he busted," he whispered. "We kinda need everyone out of here while we make it safe." John looked at him, then gave Adams back a hefty pat. "Hey, horse, man, we gotta move, okay? Come on, let's get you something to eat." Adam nodded against his chest and asked, in the most childish tone that John had ever heard him produce, "Can I have Eggos?" Everyone had to pause to look at one another, despite the broken wall. Adam Aries, Mr. Nutrition himself, the best cook on the team, and Eggos? Those were just two concepts that didn't go together, but now was not the time to argue. "Sure, brother, sure. All the Eggos you want, man. Come on. And I'll sort that elbow out while they're cooking." "Okay." Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. Fogfer, Simbreen, the Far Reaches. Charlotte Gilroy. Charlotte and Ben had landed on their feet with the move to Simbreen. As the only qualified midwife in town, not only was Charlotte busy, but she was well paid. Ben, meanwhile, had quickly and easily fallen in with the city planning department, and had been instrumental in devising an approach to utility infrastructure that should hopefully mean that Fulford's roads would never need to be dug up to access the sewerage, cables and pipes that ran alongside, rather than beneath them. Cheap housing, decent salaries and rapid promotion, Fulford was a graduate's fantasy. Except when it resulted in Charlotte's best friend slumped inconsolable over her kitchen table, of course. There was little they'd been able to do for Ava, except keep up a steady supply of tea and comforting words and contact. Eventually, she sent Ben and Sean on a walk to go get some takeaway from the good Chinese place on the far side of town that didn't deliver. That earned her an hour of alone time for some girl talk. Ava certainly seemed to appreciate it. At least she muttered, "Thanks," as soon as they were gone. "Darling, you're going to have to come up for air sooner or later," Charlotte told her. It had the desired effect. Ava laughed. A thin, delicate, slightly hysterical laugh, but a laugh nonetheless, and finally unburied her face from her arms. Instead, she rested her elbows on the table and combed her fingers into her hair. "Sorry. For being upset? I think you have a right. It's my own stupid fault, though," Ava sighed. Her hands dropped to the table, and she sat back to stare up at the ceiling instead. "What was I thinking?" "Which bit? The bit where you did it, or the bit where you were caught?" "God, I don't know." Ava looked around the room. I don't know." The clock ticked for them a good 10 seconds or so, before she sat and gave Charlotte a pleading look. "What do you think?" Charlotte took her hand. "You know, that's the first time you've asked for my opinion on this." "It is? Yeah. Oh." Ava blinked at their hands. "You'd have told me not to do it, wouldn't you?" "I would have," Charlotte agreed. "Why didn't you?" "You didn't ask." Charlotte gave her an apologetic facial shrug. "And I don't think you'd have listened either." Ava paused, then nodded and shut her eyes. "You know why I did it, though, right?" "Darling, you did it because you were lonely and horny, and Sean's hot and caring and he's a good match for you," Charlotte asserted. "Don't overthink it." "But that's just the problem," Ava exploded, tugging a hand out of Charlotte's grip to gesticulate. "I didn't think about it enough, or I thought about it trying to... She gripped her hair again. "I don't know where I went wrong." "Maybe the bit where you cheated on your boyfriend?" Charlotte suggested. Not unjustifiably, Ava glared at her. "No, darling. Maybe it really is that simple. Maybe you should have either asked him for permission or broken up with him, treated him honestly." "You're taking his side?" Ava asked. "You're not?" Ava hesitated, then swallowed, sighed, and rubbed her face. "I'm sorry," she said. "You're right, I should have. He said it himself. He was separated from me too." "Working relationships are about honesty," Charlotte told her. "If you ever have to hide something, if you ever have to lie about something, maybe it's not working." Ava nodded, miserably. "And it wasn't working for a long time. Right from the moment he decided to sign up," she said. "Don't blame him," Charlotte cautioned. I don't. He was doing what he had to, but I should have told him then that I wasn't happy with it. Maybe if I'd done that." Ava sighed and shook her head slowly. "It's done. Can't change it. I can't bring it back, just like I can't bring Sarah back, or home, or anything. I wish I could, but I can't. So, what are you going to do?" Ava flapped her arms in a resigned shrug. "Move on. I can't stay here, not with Adam and Gabe. I won't be able to..." She paused, exasperated by her own lack of eloquence, then stood up. "The boys will be back in, what, an hour?" "Give or take," Charlotte agreed, as Ava shrugged her coat on and headed for the door. "Why, what are you going..." "I'm going to say goodbye to Dad." Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. AV. Byron Group Exploration Vessel 8. Creature of Habit. The Border Stars. Proximal End. Kevin Jenkins. "Hey, Jenks. We're coming up on RS 449. The Byron Group had sunk billions of dollars into starships, and the first few had all gone missing, as had the ones sent to find out what happened to them. Byron's Stellar Exploration's working theory was that they had all suffered some kind of technical failure, and as such the group's starship building program was on hold until they figured out what that failure might be. Number 8, therefore, was a Dominion-built vessel, custom made by the assembly gantries at Ixburg shipyards after a substantial bribe. It stuck in the core to rely on alien tech, but at least it was alien tech built to the customer's exacting specifications. It was, in the shipyard's estimation, the ugliest thing they had ever built, and they had described it in contemptuous terms that translated to something like throwback. It wasn't hard to see why. BGEV-8 was shaped for atmospheric re-entry, water landing and seaworthiness, all of which have put constraints on her physical properties and dimensions, which had completely forbidden the Xberkian designers from flexing their creative muscles, especially when the clients had insisted on the redundant steel bulkheads throughout, and that every single component in the ship be A. modular, and B. accessible at a moment's notice. She looked more like a seafaring relic than a modern spaceship. There had been plenty of technical challenges too during the design phase, long before the commission had been sent to Isbuk. For starters, a ship's top superluminal speed was in part a function of its sublight power-to-weight ratio and acceleration, and in part a function of power to the warp engine. While BGEV-8's power-to-weight ratio was excellent, disguising that the order had been placed by a human organization had required ditching the capacitors and witches, and relying on the Dominion's preferred convention of a big reactor of some kind. This had limited the available power. The result was a steady top speed of 30 kilolights, enough to reach a nearby star in about 2 hours, but still decidedly pedestrian, and this had brought the supply problem into effect. Humans needed nutrients. Lots of nutrients. A crew of 7 could chew through 200 pounds of food in a week, and at 30 kilolights, BGEV-8's exploration missions were expected to take months. Months' worth of supplies would have made the ship heavier. Making the ship heavier would have hurt its power-to-weight ratio and slowed it down, meaning that it would need to carry even more supplies, which would have slowed it down further, and so on. While the equation did eventually balance itself, the end result was a much larger, much slower, and, most importantly, much more expensive ship than Byron had wanted. The solution was stasis. Everyone's bed doubled as a stasis chamber, and the ship did a pretty cunning job of making sure that you went to bed, you got a good 8 or 9 hours of sleep, and just as you were waking up fresh and ready for a new day, time stopped working for you until the duty officer decided that you were needed again. Naturally, nobody wanted to be effectively alone for subjective weeks at a time, so in practice there were always 2 duty officers, and things were carefully mixed up so that everybody worked with everybody else at some time point in the rotation. Today was Kevin's second day awake. He put Joe Gibbs to bed last night, and this morning he had woken up to find Mitch Hamilton preparing breakfast for him. He liked Mitch the best out of their crew. Mitch could fix a decent coffee and breakfast, though everyone agreed that Kevin was the best cook on board. Kevin was also the best general odd jobber, inventory sorter, cleaner and handyman on the crew, which is why he is a quartermaster. Everybody else might have had the assorted skills that went into flying the ship or surveying whatever interesting planets they stumbled across, but Byron had quite correctly decided early on that every ship needed somebody whose job was to keep everybody else comfortable, clean, well-fed, and, ideally, well-advised. Sure, being a glorified custodian wasn't exactly glamorous, but the pay was even better than he'd been putting in at Scotch Creek, and there was just something about being back out in the galaxy again. Something about the thrill of knowing that, for better or worse, they were doing something real, contributing to taking some of humanity's eggs out of a single, vulnerable basket. And if he was honest, something about the thrill of danger. He wasn't a vagrant in the galaxy unaware of and unprepared for the human race now. He was a ship's quartermaster. "Gotcha, I'll wake him up," he called. Waking the other 5 was as simple as hitting the touchscreen on the wall. As soon as he entered the room and selecting Wake All, instantly, the black haze filling every bunk faded, and his 5 colleagues, friends one and all, were sitting up and looking around. "Station day?" Jenny asked. She was their biochemistry expert, a specialist whose job revolved around examining whatever organic compounds and weird alien lifeforms they turned up. It was a good thing she was just as capable of keeping the ship in peak condition, because their most recent surrogate hadn't turned up even a single temperate world, a fact that made her tenure on this first survey vessel increasingly tenuous. Why waste crew resources on somebody who could be better used in a follow-up expedition? It would be a shame to see her go. Yup, Mitch is shaking hands with him right now. Today is Friday, 14:30 ship time. Coffee? Everyone nodded eagerly, and probably set about their morning ablutions. 3 years of working together had sorted out a few kinks and sticking points there. When everyone was awake, nobody got to soak in the shower or meditate on the shitter. You got in, you did your business, you cleaned up, and if you forgot to take your clothes or talon with you, too bad for you. Modesty was a luxury, and not one that the rest of the crew were obligated to engineer on your behalf. Everybody was grabbing cups of coffee with wet hair in short order. Mitch, however, was frowning when he stuck his head round the hatch to the flight deck. "Yo, they're refusing us docking," he called. Everyone exchanged glances, and Monica and Derek, co-pilot and flight engineer respectfully, squeezed into their seats, leaving the three scientists and Kevin to eavesdrop. Did they say why? Nope, not yet. Resupply station 449er, Byron Group Echo Victor 8, again. We'd sure appreciate an explanation. Why are we being denied permission? Over. Because we're human, why else? Kevin murmured rhetorically, quietly enough so the three on the flight deck wouldn't hear. You think something happened? There isn't an astronomer, Charlie asked him in a whisper. Yup. Like what? Jennifer asked. The swarm of swarms, bet you. No bet, Ryan grunted. He was their geologist and, as such, by far and away the most profitable member of the crew. He liked to joke that the job of the other six was to get him to some place where he could dig up something valuable. Yeah, never go against Jenk's nose for xenopolitics, Charlie agreed. Never go against his nose for politics full stop, Jenny agreed. Jesus, they're launching fighters, Doak announced. They really don't want us docking. Whoa there, take it easy, 449er. You can plainly see we're holding position. Maybe at least synchronize comms. Remind them they have to under Article 7 of the... Kevin began to tell him. I know, Jenks, Derek snapped. Okay. Youch, Charlie muttered. It's cool, he's just stressed. I'll get the big screen turned on. Ryan frowned at him. Why? Because there's going to be a message from Byron waiting for us. He was right. No sooner had Derek bullied the station into grudgingly allowing BGEV-8 to synchronize with the interstellar communications relay than the ship was announcing a priority message for all eyes. Monica put a few tactful light minutes between them and the station, and they went dark in interplanetary space before relaxing enough to gather in the ship's common area, a circular lounge with furniture that folded into the deck to make room for the gym mat, and load the message. Sure enough, their billionaire employer's frowning visage was the very first frame of the message. If I'm any judge, you'll have an inkling something's gone wrong by the time you'll get this. If I know non-humans, they're probably in the grip of a panic again. Enclose this footage which explains why in detail, but I'll make it short. The swarm of swarms attacked Capital Station. Destroyed it, in fact. Some kind of human spaceborne special forces called the SAW got involved and... it's all in the video briefing that follows these orders. Come back ASAP. Carter, Brown, you're clear to use the emergency recall. I want the 7 of you at our priority meeting. See you shortly. Emergency recall? Kevin asked. You heard the man, Mitch, Monica said, and tied the chain that she'd had round her neck from day one out from inside her vest. Mitch Carter produced something from his pocket, and together they slipped into the bridge. Emergency recall? Kevin repeated. It was something the group gave us after losing all those other ships, Monica replied. There was a subtle sound, a little like somebody had thunked a bulkhead with their fist, and caused the whole ship to give a dull ring. Interplanetary dark space was gone in an instant, replaced to one side by a greying cratered horizon and, rising above it... Oh no, Kevin moaned. That stupid son of a bitch. What? Ryan asked. He's had an open jump being into Earth this whole time? Our emergency recall, yeah. What, is that a problem? Kevin spun on his heel and headed for his locker. That's between me and Moses Byron, he replied. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, AV. Folkvar, Simbrine, the far reaches. Gabriel Aries. Jess paused and looked up from her desk. Doorbell? Are we expecting Ava tonight? I'll get it. Despite time and physiotherapy, Gabe's old injury was getting progressively worse, and hauling himself up out of his chair was still difficult, which was why he made a point of doing it every time he had an excuse. He might be on a one-way trip to a wheelchair, but he was down to his letting it take him without a fight. Besides, letting Jess do something as simple as answering the door for him would have made him feel like a cripple, and he hated that. It was Ava all right, wearing her oldest and favourite jacket, the simple, rugged one that she and Adam had got together before coming to Simbrine, with the From Message patch on her sleeve. She gave him a tiny, sad smile that made him hesitate mid-greeting. Hey, Dad. Hey. Adam found out. Gabe let out a long, contained sigh, stepped forward and gave her a hug. I'm sorry, Ava. She hugged back, tight and shaking, and mumbled something he didn't catch. What was that? I said I'm sorry. I didn't see. I was so stupid. Shh. Gabe just held her a bit longer. Eventually, she pulled away. I'm gonna go back to Earth, she announced. Try and be somebody. Somebody who isn't a complete fuck-up. Hey. For what it's worth, Gabe began. Like I said, you're a daughter to me nowadays. I won't lie, when you told us I was kinda disappointed in you. But I love you anyway, okay? I know you'll do okay. I don't know, Ava sighed and leaned against the wall. I can never seem to figure out how to do the right thing. Want some advice? Gabe offered. She looked up at him, waiting. Well, okay, it's more of a story. When Ava's expectant gaze didn't change, he nodded and told it. Back in San Diego, there was this woman, a private investigator, Terry Boone. I met her about a year and a half before the bomb went off. She shot an intruder in her apartment. He was on her couch, had a gun, had no right to be there. Open and shut case of self-defense. Anyway, Boone claimed that the guy she killed was working for somebody else, and that they just try again. Which, that's a serious claim. We took it seriously. Nothing came of it. Nothing we could follow up on anyway. Nothing we could legitimately find. Nothing admissible. Pointed to this guy working for anybody but himself, right? Ava nodded, listening. Well, my whole job was about what was admissible. Building a case that had to stand up in a court of law and not get thrown out on a technicality. Procedure, right? That's the nature of police work, and it's like that for a good reason. So I found myself stuck. I believed Boone, but I couldn't continue the investigation because I had strayed outside of procedure. Can't do that, so I had to drop it. He sighed. A few months later, she was dead, and she was tied up in the bombing of the city. I can't go into it, but sometimes I ask myself if I could have done anything differently. If maybe I had just been lax on procedure that one time. Maybe those 2 million people would still be alive. It's possible. He held up a hand as Ava started to speak. Or maybe they could have blown up 3 cities, or 10. Or maybe the whole world would have been bombed flat from orbit by the hunters by now. I don't know. And that's kind of the point. I regret not doing more for her, but I can't think of a single thing I'd do differently. You'll see what I'm saying? Ava thought about it, then nodded slowly. You can't do more than what seems like a good idea at the time, she said. Right. You screw up, you move on, you learn, you screw up again. Gave her a wary smile. Some of us screw up worse than others, but there's no secret. You've just got to forgive yourself and move on. Learn from your mistakes. Right. Gabe nodded. Do you regret what you did? Yeah. You gonna do it again? Hell no. There we go then. You're a better woman than you were yesterday. Ava managed to laugh at that, though she sobered again quickly. I'm going to miss you, Dad. I'll miss you too. Come back, okay? When you're ready. When I'm ready. I promise. They hugged again. Goodbye, Dad. Goodbye. He watched her down the stairs, then let himself back into the apartment. Jess took one look at him, stood and gave him a hug. Are you okay? How much did you hear? All of it. Gabe sighed. I'll just learn from my mistakes and move on, like I told her to. That's easier said than done. Gabe just shrugged and shrank down into his chair again, rubbing his face. Así es la vida. Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. AV. Byron Group. Head offices. Omaha, Nebraska. USA. Earth. Kevin Jenkins. Look, Rachel, I'm telling you this is important. Kevin had dealt with his employer's personal assistant before. Byron had a policy where literally anybody in the company could arrange a meeting with him, and crewing one of his ships was one of the positions that earned you a place in the short queue for those meetings. But there was still a queue. The idea that somebody might want to meet with him urgently apparently wasn't in her briefing. And I'm telling you that Mr. Byron sees people with appointments, she repeated. And how long will an appointment take to arrange? Kevin challenged her. If it's really that important, I can fit you in for tomorrow at... She was spared Kevin's frustrated lambasting by her phone ringing, and Moses Byron's voice on the speaker. Rachel, if you don't let him in, I do believe I'll just need a new door anyway. Yes, Mr. Byron. She gestured to the door for him. Byron's office was just as calculated as everything else about the man, in Kevin's opinion. He had pretty much instantly pegged Byron as a self-interested bastard who had his head on straight enough to spot that public opinion was a more valuable currency than mere dollars. And everything the man did has been part of that philosophy. The office wasn't large, and you'd have been forgiven for mistaking it for that of a high school principal or a junior manager, rather than a man whose personal worth eclipsed anything that Kevin could have imagined earning in several lifetimes. There was nothing either ultra-modern or obviously antique on display, just a few small bookshelves, some framed family photographs, a nice view. You had to look closer to spot that the desk was a bespoke piece in pale oak, see the hand stitching in the office chair, or noticed that the coffee next to the machine in the corner probably cost more per 100 grams than the ones Kevin had served in his bars had cost per 1,000. It all spoke to a fondness for the benefits of a billionaire's life, while keeping up a pretense of frugal moderation. "Gotta hand it to you, Kevin. Not many people demand to see me," Byron told him, standing up politely. He was like that, always polite and engaging, even if he was obviously nettled. "Yeah, well, not every day I learn we've had a back door open around the moon for, 5 months? Kevin told him. "And? Mr. Byron, that's like the worst idea since... It's a really bad idea." Byron's head inclined slightly to one side. "Why? You know something I don't?" he asked. "What, besides the swarm of swarms? You sent us that video, boss man," Kevin told him. "You think if they can do that to Capital Station, they'll struggle with us?" Byron pushed his chair out of the way and stepped over to the wet bar in the corner. "The Hunters," he said, "don't have a damn thing anywhere even close to Sol." "And how do you know that?" Kevin asked him. "Oh, that's easy," Byron said. "All we needed was a Hunter's corpse. No shortage of those about. Didn't even have to send a fighting Homo sapiens out to grab one. Just put in a call to the right people. Once the eggheads had his communications implants, engineering a sensor that could pick up their chatter with simplicity itself. They assure me there are no Hunters anywhere near Earth. Drink? I ain't no bartender, but I mix a decent Creole." "And what about other threats?" Kevin asked, declining the offer with a hand gesture. Byron paused in pouring a drink for himself. Kevin noted idly that, although he'd offered a Creole, what he was pouring for himself was actually a Shirley Temple. "You mean to tell me you know about some other threats?" he asked quietly. "What? You were involved in strategic intelligence briefings while you were cleaning tables at Scurf?" "One of the NDAs I'm under forbids me from telling you how many NDAs I'm under, nor for what reasons," Kevin shot back. "We're talking serious friendly stuff here. But fuck, if it's serious enough and if I have to, I'll break every last fucking one and go to the pen knowing I tried to avert disaster." Byron arched an eyebrow at him. "Though, I'd take it as a personal favour if I didn't have to," Kevin admitted. "That's serious, huh?" A new voice entered the conversation. "More than you might guess, Mr. Byron." Kevin and Byron turned to the door. A slim, trim woman in a dark suit gave them a slim, trim smile and invited herself in. Of Rachel there was no sign. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm pleased to see you have this well in hand. I'll pretend the bit where you mused about sharing classified information was purely speculative." "Special Agent Williams, right?" Kevin greeted her, trotting the name up from memory. They hadn't met since the hierarchy debriefing at Scotch Creek, back before the San Diego blast. "Pleasure to see you again. Always nice to see my tax dollars walking in the door wearing Armani." "Good memory," Williams acknowledged him. "How's your partner? Houghton, right?" "He's at his daughter's bar mitzvah. Thank you for asking. I was invited, but, well, there was a serious incident involving an unknown, unshielded, and only barely encrypted jump beacon orbiting the moon. Lucky for you, that ship you rode in on was broadcasting Moses Byron's name everywhere, or you'd have been dead within seconds of arriving." Byron cleared his throat. "I'm not used," he declared, "to being ignored in my own office." "Where are my manners?" Williams asked, smoothly producing and opening her identification. "Williams, CIA." Byron glowered at the seal she was showing him for a good few seconds, as if expecting it to be so cheap a forgery as to fall apart in her hands. When this failed to happen, he grudgingly put his drink down and extended a hand. Williams didn't shake it. "So," Byron sat down to cover the snub, "would either of you care to indulge me as to why in the good gosh darn the company just walked into my office and my PA is nowhere in sight?" Williams turned a hand palm up, inviting Kevin to speak. Kevin's caution briefly wore with his desire to launch into a full-blown rant at Byron, and won. Somehow he suspected he was being tested here. "Let's call it the big bad, out there," he said. "Bigger and badder than the Hunters, that's for sure. It wants us all dead. It might use the Hunters to get what it wants, and it's old. Old like you'd laugh me out of the office if I told you." "How Lovecraftian," Byron drawled, swelling his drink. He had that look Kevin had seen on several men in his time, the intense one that spoke of furious calculation going on silently, while the face remained impassive. "I'd almost prefer Lovecraft," Williams said. "Mr. Jenkins has put it with supreme delicacy, so allow me to be blunter. We are in real terms no more military powerful on the interstellar scale than we were 10 years ago. Forget Simbrine, and the Firebirds, and the V-Class destroyers. Forget the Hephaestus LLC and your own accomplishments. Forget even the panicky politics of the Dominion. In real terms, the human race collectively is still very much insignificant. But so is a grain of sand. And if you've ever got one of those in your sock, Mr. Byron, you know just how irritating a grain of sand can be, and how badly you will want to scratch it." She flashed that slim, trim smile again. Except that in our case, scratching is for now impossible, thanks to the system containment field that you violated. Byron took a sip and set his glass down. This seems, he observed, like the kind of critical information that a man in my position, doing the things I was doing, ought to have been told. You were and still are judged to be a dangerous personality, Williams told him. She stepped forward and, uninvited, put her briefcase on Byron's desk. Given that you had the information to know that your stunt with that beacon was a bad idea, and went ahead with it anyway, that judgment stands. And you figured that an ignorant, dangerous personality was less of a problem than an educated one? Byron retorted. Extinction ain't exactly my business plan. Had I known that was on the cards... Spare me, Williams interrupted. We know that Governor Sandy hinted about a danger with neural implants to you in private. Anybody with your resources can't possibly be ignorant of just how aggressively the Soren jets were formed, nor of the huge sums of government money that went dark at the same time. And if you were somehow oblivious to all of those, I'd defy you to look me in the eye and tell me that San Diego escaped your attention. Byron's expression didn't change, but he did draw a long and slightly indignant breath as he listened. You already had all the information you needed, Mr. Byron, Williams scolded him. And still you proceeded unwisely. I shudder to think what you might have done had we filled in the detail for you. Should have co-opted me then, Byron grunted. Maybe, Williams agreed. She turned to Kevin. Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate your involvement here, and I'm sure you could contribute in all sorts of ways, but this conversation between the United States of America and Mr. Moses Byron is not for mortal ears. I'm sorry. Kevin knew better than to argue. Williams held all the cards here. All right, he agreed. But before you lay into my employer... Williams nodded and made a gesture of invitation. If there's a learning point in this whole clusterfuck, is that we really shouldn't be keeping our people in the dark, alright? That goes for you too, Mr. Byron. Briefing only 2 members of the crew about the recall meant I never got the chance to warn you it was a bad idea. Williams and Byron frowned at each other, then both made a conceding nod. There's a fine art to secrecy, Williams agreed. Errors in judgment may have happened all around. We intend to address that. Byron just nodded again. Fine, Kevin told them, breathing a little easier. You two godly folk have fun talking over the mortal's head. I'll see you at that policy meeting, Mr. Byron. I'd be grateful if you would shut the door, please, Mr. Jenkins, Williams said. She produced a phone from her pocket and tapped at it as Kevin crossed the room. Kevin couldn't resist just a little eavesdrop as he closed the door. Before it clicked softly shut, the last he heard was, It's me. Yes, he's right here, Mr. President. Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. 1st day, AV. HMS Shaman. HMNB Fogfer. Fogfer, Simbrine, the Far Reaches. Adam Aries. For a blissful few seconds when Adam woke up, there was just the light of sunrise staining what promised to be a clear blue day, and the loose, relaxed feeling of muscles newly mended by Crew D. In those seconds, the world was perfect. Then yesterday hit him in the head. Fuck. He levered himself upright. He was still in his civvies, basketball shorts and a t-shirt that he made himself, one of the few items of clothing he had that was actually loose in him. Baseball was slumped in an armchair in the doorway, snoring quietly with a book on his knee. Somebody had draped a blanket over him, and there was a mug of tea on the floor next to him, untouched and long gone cold. Adam recognized one of Major Powell's mugs. Remorse stabbed him right in the heart. Base was going to be suffering from lost sleep for the rest of the day, which was no fun at all on the Source training regimen. A quick glance at the clock said it was only 0530. A Simbrine day was 28 hours long in total, close enough to Earth that people didn't really suffer from the difference. In fact, the extra hours usually translated to feeling like every day had been both productive and restful. Still, it Base had been up most of the night. John? Base startled slightly in his seat and blinked his eyes open. Oh shit. He straightened up, moving his back sinuously with a rapid-fire of little pops and crackles, as he cleared out the stiffness from a few hours of bad posture. Wasn't supposed to sleep. You okay, bro? Adam asked him. Are you? Fuck if I know, Adam grumbled, and sat up properly, swinging his feet down onto the floor. John didn't say anything, just bookmarked what he'd been reading, retrieved the tea, sipped it, grimaced, and took both book and drink into the kitchen. A few seconds later, Adam heard the microwave close and hum into life. First things first, after any serious injury was repaired by Crew D, the first thing to do was to test it. 20 push-ups were more than enough to confirm that his elbow was fine, and they blasted out some of the dust in his head for good measure. He padded through into the kitchen. "You stayed up all night?" he asked. "Yeah. We figured somebody had to keep an eye on you." "Dude, I wasn't going to do something stupid." "I know, just..." John shrugged expansively, and sipped his reheated tea. "Thanks, bro." "First breakout's always the worst," John sighed. "I can't believe her," Adam sighed, thumping over to the fridge. To his quiet delight, there was still half a box of Eggos in there. Where did you even get those in Simbrine? Londis? Adam grunted and nodded as he turned on the grill. Able seaman Thomas Londis Magoro derived his nickname from a chain of British convenience stores, thanks to his legendary ability to produce almost anything. If you wanted something and you wanted it quick, you went to Londis. "I gotta ask, brother," John said. "Eggos?" Adam shrugged. "My dad made them for me whenever Mum was being difficult. Guess they're my comfort food," he laughed. "Hell, shove enough butter and syrup on them, they're probably a great fit for our macronutrients, right?" John gave a half-hearted half laugh and sipped his tea again. "Something wrong?" Adam asked. "Stop trying to put a brave face on it, man. You're torn up," John told him. Adam hesitated, then shook his head and waved his hands resignedly. "It's done, man. It's over. Fuck her. Just gotta move on, I guess." John just gave him a patient stare. Alright, I just don't know why, man. How could she? What the fuck? She threw it all away. Why?" "Brother, I love you, but you've got the girl smarts of a fucking 10-year-old, John grunted and drained his mug. "You're saying it's my fault?" Adam asked, incredulous. "Nah," John shook his head. "But it takes two to dance, man. Do you really think you were being fair on her? Never there, not really there, even when you were there, you follow me?" "She's still the one who..." "Yeah," John interrupted. "But I've done that shit too, man." Adam blinked at him. "You have?" "I played around, yeah. I ain't proud of it, but..." John scratched his head thoughtfully. "Look, the cheater's to blame, but they cheat for a reason. And at the time, it seemed like a good reason, that's all I'm saying." Adam didn't reply, and they lapsed into thoughtful silence until all the Eggos were out of the grill, and drowned in butter and maple syrup. "What could I have done differently, though?" he asked. "I wrote her all the time, called her every chance I got, took as much leave as I could to spend time with her." "You know what I remember?" John asked. Adam had served them a couple of Eggos as well, and he'd apparently decided he enjoyed them. "You remember that night we were on the plane coming up to Scotch Creek to jump out here, and she called you really upset about something? And at the end of that call she was mad at you and hung up, and you had no idea what she'd even called about?" "Yeah." "Par for the fucking course with you, bro. Every conversation you two ever had worked out like that somehow. I mean, did you ever ask her how her degree was going, or take a look at her website?" "She has a website?" John rolled back. You don't even fucking know she has a website?" "What's on this website?" "Her photos, man. She's a photographer. Or did you not notice that? It's her portfolio." Adam just stared at him, shaking his head slightly while he chewed. "Jesus fuck." John rubbed his forehead. "Do I actually know more about your girlfriend than you do?" "Ex-girlfriend." "And this is fucking why, man. This shit right here is why she cheated on you." Adam looked down at his plate. "Doesn't excuse it," he grunted. "No, but it explains it, though." John took a breath and cooled down. "She didn't just do this just because, brother. She had a reason, even if that reason wasn't good enough. I mean, how much leave did you have saved up? 60 days? Use it or lose it, right? I remember, the Major had to order us to take leave time." "Yeah, but ramping down and coming back up in the training takes a month each. They would have put us behind..." "Adam," John sighed. "I'm not telling you if you were right or wrong not to take leave. I'm telling you why it happened. And what more you could have done. That's all. You could have taken more leave, and you could have spent more time with her. You could have actually taken an interest. You didn't do any of those things, and, well, this happened. She's the one who did it, but you've got to ask why she felt she had to, right?" Not wanting to admit out loud that he was probably right, Adam forced himself to shut up and think, rather than argue anymore. He kept to himself for the next couple of hours as the rest of the guys woke up, and as the morning routine of keeping the dorm clean and tidy unfolded, necessary, because it would have reeked of Mount Musk, body odor and sweat otherwise, the simple chores gave his mind time to work. For their part, the guys clearly sensed that he wasn't in a talkative mood, and were cool with that. They were just there, solid and dependable, and giving him exactly what he needed, room and quiet to think. He appreciated that hugely. They were in the middle of hanging out the laundry when the dorm's phone rang. Akiyama fielded it. "Yo, horse, call from the gate guard for you." Adam and Bay shared a frown, and he jogged over to take the call. "Here it is." "Staff Sergeant, I have a gentleman here asking for you by name. He says it's important. Name of Harvey? Sean Harvey? Turn him away, Adam told him. He says Ava's gone missing, Sergeant. Adam must have paused for longer than he thought, because the next word he heard was, Sergeant, I'll be right there. He notified Yrrol of where he was going, and jogged the few hundred meters over to the main gates. Sure enough, Sean was loitering at the guard post, pacing nervously. Adam didn't waste time on being nice. What do you want? She's just gone. She went to see your dad last night, and now she's... Nobody knows where she is, Sean explained. I'm kind of worried she might... Shut up. Adam spun away from him. I was halfway back to the gates when Sean spoke up. This is why she did it, you know? Adam didn't turn around, but he did stop. Do you even care about her? He asked. Or did you just want to get your dick wet? Do you care about her? Sean retorted. Or just about your fucking territory? Several £100 of angry saw operator was in his face half a second later. To Sean's credit, he did little more than rock back at his heels. He was shaking, but he held his own. You're just going to walk away and let her be missing? I was going, Adam snarled, to request leave to go look for her. Sergeant? The guards stepped forward cautiously. Break it up, please. You know where she is? Sean asked, ignoring them. Adam didn't ignore them. He straightened. What the fuck makes you think you have a right to know? He asked. Because I'm her bloody friend, you giant pillock, Sean snapped. Adam's fist clenched. Friend? He asked. Is that what you call it? Yes. Sergeant. The gate guards had drawn closer. Break it up, please. Adam spared him a sideways glance, then very, very carefully relaxed his hand before he aimed a finger at Sean's face. You don't get shit from me, Harvey, he growled. She can tell you herself where she got to, after I've gone and got her. Fuck her, fuck you, and fuck off. He stalked back through the gates, back to the dorm, and right up to Yrrol, who'd taken over as their NCOIC since they lost Lexi. Requesting leave, he said, getting right to the point. Yrrol blinked at him. Dude, you're gonna just tell the gate guard? Yeah, I'm gonna be gone all day. Wanted to grab some stuff and tell you in person. Yrrol gave him a hug. Okay, brother. You go do what you gotta. Adam just nodded and gave him a weak smile. He spun around the door, grabbing his light rug from under his bunk to throw in a couple of punches of juice, an old sweater of his that he never wore any longer on account of it being much too small, 2 bags of beef jerky and a small first aid kit. He changed his footwear too. He usually wore flip-flops, went barefoot around the base. Boots and shoes were too expensive and broke too quickly between the size of his feet, his own mass and his tendency to bounce around rather than lumber. His hiking sandals, on the other hand, had taken everything he could throw at them for 2 years. A couple more essentials, including his phone, and he was back out of the gate less than 10 minutes after he sent Sean packing. He hung an immediate left, followed the fence around 2 sides of the base, and then set out for the young, broadleaf plantation that came right up as close as the foresters were allowed. It was exactly what he needed. Adam had never been the kind of guy who did his greatest thinking in a quiet room at the best of times, and 5 years in the service had only strengthened the connection between his muscles and his brain. It was almost like one couldn't work properly unless the other was busy. Sure, a simple, steady hike, even at the hard pace he set, though gently sloping woodland wasn't exactly taxing, but it was enough to settle his body into a rhythm and let his brain get down to business. Anybody coming back down the trail would have been a little alarmed to run into a guy who put pro wrestlers to shame, talking angrily to himself. He spent the first 2 miles aggressively rehearsing all the ways he was going to tell Ava off. Then he spent the next 2 miles telling himself off, rehearsing ways to reconcile, rehearsing her side of the argument. When he did eventually run into somebody, it was an elderly couple out walking their dog, probably from one of the little peripheral forest communities. Fulford had attracted a lot of them. Elderly couples and early retirees wanting a place where their pensions would go further. A nudist camp, the odd religious commune, kept under close scrutiny by supreme colonial security, in case they started showing any cultish behaviour, or just second homes, owned by hard-working reclamation project workers and Fulford City employees, who wanted somewhere quiet to retreat for the weekend. He saw them long before they were in earshot, shut up, met them with a polite touch to his forehead and a "Sir, ma'am," and ignored the stares. People around Fulford were pretty used to the SOR, but these two had clearly never met one of the operators before. Their reaction was pretty standard for the first-timers. The contact was enough to shut him up for the rest of the walk, or at least turn his thought process into a steady mill of ideas being worked over internally, rather than the crazy person shouting at trees. He was almost in a positive mood when he finally reached the point where the trail branched, leading off in one direction towards Scrap Point, a research outpost dedicated to diving the alien spaceship wreckage on the lakebed. The other way went down to Sarah's Beach, A public recreation spot that was actually a good kilometre or so from the spot that he personally thought of as Sarah's Beach, but much more accessible. He followed the second trail until it intersected the paved road, and rather than hanging a right and walking down to the lake shore as the trail signs directed, instead crossed straight over and plunged on into the woods. The ecological calamity that the Simbrine Reclamation Project insisting on calling the Terran Microbe Action Zone, and which the colonists knew rather less formally as the Skid Mark, hadn't ever reached out this far, and so none of the native flora had been felled. It was still being steadily and relentlessly choked out by the Earthling imports, but that was all part of the plan. First to come logging everything within 10 kilometers of the zone, replanting and populating with species imported from Earth, and that was it. The natural aggressiveness and biological advantage of Deathworld life was being left to do the rest. The result was a confused boundary zone where imported broadleaf trees gave way to a tangle of Earth and Simbrine flora, the latter steadily dying back as the former outgrew them, shaded them over, guzzled the soil nutrients, and, in a lot of cases, parasitized them. And then, nothing but natives. Native trees, native birdish things, and mammalish things, and other life forms that were, for the most part, surprisingly ordinary looking. The birdish things had mouths with teeth rather than beaks, and the mammalish things were covered in something that was more like moss than like fur or wool. And of course the universal constant in Simbrine flora was 3 eyes, but nothing that actually looked amazingly exotic. Just life, getting on, with the business of living and oblivious to the creeping extinction only 100 yards away. There was even a stand of Simbrina Simscamelia Deleani, the Simbrine tea bush. It was growing not even 20 yards away from a thorny, berry-laden snarl of Pterina rubus fruticosus. The botanists had decided very early on that in order to remain sensible and useful, the taxonomic system of classification needed to be amended to include, above the domain level, the planet rank. Adam had to admit, Simbrine was still beautiful. He heard Ava long before he saw her. He could hear his voice between the trees and bushes, talking to somebody. He had no idea who. Sean hadn't mentioned anybody else being missing, and people never came this far along the shore from Sarah's Beach. She turned out to be talking to herself. She was right where he'd known she would be, seated on the same odd rock where she'd always sat, facing out towards the same view with her clothes folded neatly on the stone next to her, resting with her elbows and her knees, looking down at her feet. She flinched when she realized somebody was there, then relaxed when she saw who it was. "Hey." Adam blinked. He hadn't foreseen that she'd be nude. Did you swim?" "No, I didn't swim." She shook her head. I'm more comfortable this way up here." She leaned over and grabbed her t-shirt. "Aren't you cold?" he asked. She flapped the shirt to get it the right way out. "Kinda, but it's not too bad." "Who are you talking to anyway?" Adam asked her. There was nobody else present. "This is going to sound really stupid." Ava's face went a little red as she tugged her shirt on and covered up. "What?" "I was talking to Sarah." Adam hesitated, then gently rested a concerned hand on her upper back. "Baby." The tone of endearment surprised him. After everything, after learning what she'd done, his first instinct was still to be tender and to love her. "I know," Ava nodded and rubbed her face. "I know she's dead. I know. It's stupid, She was 14, Ava. Adam sat down. "Maybe not the best source of life wisdom, you know." Ava sobbed a laugh, and they sat together in silence for a long time. Not touching, but close. "I brought some juice, and a sweater, and stuff." Adam handed her the bag. A tiny grateful smile put in a cameo appearance as she dug out one of the juice pouches and the sweater, which she shrugged on. She must have been colder than she realized. "I should probably have told somebody where I was going, huh?" she asked. "Sean was worried for you." "And he went to you?" "Yeah. He's got balls, I'll give him that." Ava didn't answer. Instead, she impaled the juice pouch with a straw and drained it. "What were you talking to Sarah about anyway?" Adam asked her once she finished. Ava glanced at him, then down at her bare feet. "You know what's really stupid?" she asked. "Like really, really? What the fuck is wrong with me, stupid?" She looked at him again. "You explained everything perfectly yesterday. You put it totally into perspective. I get it. I get just how badly I fucked up, and still, there's this bitch voice in the back of my head that wants me to believe, that's trying to tell me I did nothing wrong." She looked out over the lake. "I was trying to get rid of it." "By talking to Sarah?" She nodded, miserably picking at a fingernail. "Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it?" He shook his head gently. Not really. Nothing makes sense. Adam mulled that comment over. No, he decided. Things do make sense. You know what the weirdest part of all this is? What? If you just told me, or asked me, fuck, I might even have been okay with it, because I get it, I understand. You put it perfectly yesterday too. I married the Air Force first, he sighed. But instead you lied to me, Ava, for what, 2 years? About that, she agreed, nodding sadly. I get that I was neglecting you, Adam told her. I get that I was making decisions for us both without consulting you. Hell, I get that he was probably good for you. What I just don't get is why you couldn't be straight with me. He wiped his own eyes off. For God's sake, yeah, breaking up with me would have hurt. But this? Ava, who usually shed tears so easily, seemed to have run out. Or maybe she'd just gone somewhere past them, where they were no longer relevant. Either way, her face was a mask of dry despondency. Why, Ava? I've been asking myself that question all morning. And I really thought I was doing it for you. Charlotte said it was because I was lonely and horny, but I can remember thinking, is this or I lose him, and... She exhaled and ran 3 fingers through her hair. It's so stupid. I'm so stupid. If I hadn't got so hung up on holding on to the past, at least I'd still have my integrity, you know. But because I got it in my head I was doing it for you, I went and did completely the wrong thing. Adam stood up. I thought I was doing this for you, he told her, gesturing at the full, hugely muscled mass of himself. But you said it last night. You didn't want or need me to do this, and I sure as fuck didn't want or need you to cheat on me. He sat down again. Maybe we both need to stop believing our own bullshit, he concluded. Ava just stared at him, so he sighed and elaborated. I thought I was doing this to protect you, he said. Really I did, I was convinced. But you're right. If I had really been acting for you, then... hell, I'd probably have gone into colonial security and been there for you every night, and... instead I just got caught up in this. I was angry and grieving over Sarah. I wanted to fight back. And then it turned out I'm good at fighting back. The best, maybe. He looked out across the lake, choosing his words. Do you know what it's like to get pulled along into something like that? Where everything just lines up and you'd never even think of slowing down or stopping because it just feels right? Because you're enjoying it so much, you don't ever want it to end? Ava nodded. You feel like you're taking back your life, she agreed. Right. You feel like you're in control, but really you're strapped in for the ride. But because you've got a wheel in your hands, you don't notice you're not doing the steering. Right. That's how it was for me too, she said. Do you think that's the truth? Adam asked her. Or is it just more bullshit we're inventing to make ourselves feel better? Ava paused. I think it's the truth, she said. Or at least, I hope it is. She trailed off, then spread her arms helplessly. I don't know anymore. I spent all this time trying to do the right thing and then complete the wrong thing instead. I don't know if I can trust what's in my head. Then how can I trust you? Adam asked. Ava didn't answer, just stared despairingly at the water. A couple of minutes elapsed in mutual silence, before she finally spoke, quietly. We're done, aren't we? Adam nodded and stood up. I love you, Ava, he said, but there's just no... I can't. I know. She looked up at him, grief and remorse written in every nuance of her expression. I'm so sorry, Adam. I'm sorry too. He turned his back on her and started back up the trail. Date point. 10th year. 2nd month. 2nd week. 1st day. AV. Vancouver General Hospital. Vancouver. British Columbia. Canada. Earth. Sue Chang. White. White and beeping. And sort of a soft blue. Greens too. Hints of scarlet light and a click hiss valve noise that corresponded to a strange pressure in her chest. Blink. Frown. Focus. A question floated across her mind in 3 languages. Where you Nali? That wasn't right. Okinai? Shiem Nali? So hard to think. She tried to take a calming breath, clear her head, and something started to make an alarming sound. Zhu! Nurse! Nurse, help! Purple. Moving purple and dark skin and a soothing tone. Like Ima comforting a wailing cub. It's okay. She's just awake. It's okay. Shh, darling. Don't fight the ventilator. It's okay. It's okay. You're safe. Zhu? What was a Zhu? Oh, right. Nurse. Ventilator. Hospital. Earth. So hard to think, but those strangers by her bedside, The tiny elderly woman in tears. The skinny old balding man holding her hand with stress ploughing his forehead. The tall fat man behind them with his hands on their... No, that was wrong. She didn't have a big brother. Her parents weren't... Okay, honey, shh. Calm now. I'm sorry, this is really distressing her. We better put her under again. It's okay, darling. You're just not ready yet. It's okay. Something in her left hand. Something that made all the wrong go away. Something white. And colours. Cars by her bed. Get well soon. We missed you. Welcome home. There was no beeping this time. No hissing or clicking. Nothing in her throat doing her breathing for her. Just... yes. A drip in her hand and darkness outside the window. Warm yellow light through a slightly ajar door, emitting hushed conversation. Shu sat up, cautiously. She was alone. She had time to gather her thoughts, assess the situation. Fact check. She was in a hospital, with a drip in her hand. The gravity felt normal. The air had a certain richness to it, warm and nourishing. She couldn't tell what the voices outside were saying. Their volume was much too tactful for that, but the cadences sounded English. She carefully selected the right word. Hello? The conversation outside ceased, and then there were brisk footsteps, a rustle of scrubs, and a middle-aged nurse poked her head round the door. Her face lit up and saying, Shu, oh, hi! Shu froze, having not planned the conversation this far ahead. Hi, oh, it's okay, honey. You're a bit disorientated right now, eh? A little, Shu nodded. I'm in Vancouver? Yep, the nurse patted the bed. I'm Liz. Am I okay to sit down? Sure. Liz did so, settling comfortably next to her. You and your friends made a stir when you showed up, you especially. I did? Oh, where am I? I'm sorry, can I get you something, sweetie? No solids until the doctor says otherwise, but I could call out for some soup. Actually, that'd be really nice. Yes, please. Okay. You'll be okay for a few seconds? Shu nodded for her and managed a little smile. Liz wasn't long. Zhu heard her feet in the hall, a quick conversation, and she returned in only a minute or two. Still, it was long enough for Zhu to sort out her head and think through the most pressing questions she had. So, Liz said, busting back in, where were we? Are my friends okay? Zhu asked her. Julian and Allison? They're fine. They're asleep right now, but they're just fine. You had the worst of it, actually. I did? Liz gestured with her hand, raising her left arm and touching a spot on her ribs, with an expression hinting for Zhu to do the same. When she did, there was a dressing there. You've been asleep for about 3 days, Liz told her. There are a couple of operations. Dr. Spooney will explain it all in the morning. Can I see them? In the morning, sweetie. You're all pretty badly hurt. You need to rest. Liz's tone was kindly and comforting, but firm enough to convince Zhu she wouldn't get her way there. She looked at the cars on her bedside again. We cause a stir? Especially you. Vancouver's own prodigal daughter, gone these 10 years, and... 10 years? Zhu's hand flew to her face in shock. How long will we... Oh, right. The escape pod. Stasis. Oh, I'm sorry, sweetie. That just came out. I'm sorry. Liz soothed. No, it's okay. I knew it was going to be about that, but... Zhu rubbed her face. It didn't help. Her hands were shaking, so were her shoulders, and there was an urgent heat coming up from deep inside her, behind her eyes. Liz, demonstrating the sixth sense of mothers and nurses the world over, pulled her into a hug before the tears even arrived, and let her get it out of her system. I'm home. God, I made it. I'm home. Yes, you did. Zhu disengaged gently and sat up, wiping her cheeks. Sorry. Don't even apologize to me, sweetie. It's okay. Liz smiled warmly, and indicated that Zhu's soup had arrived some time while she hadn't been paying attention. Zhu didn't need prompting. She scooped it up and, after a tentative sip to make sure it wasn't too hot, devoured the lot. It wasn't the greatest soup ever, but it was warm. It was comforting. It was chicken. It was amazing how many things in the galaxy didn't taste like chicken. And it lasted maybe 30 seconds. Ooh, Liz made an appreciative noise. You needed that, eh? Oh, God, yes. Zhu wiped a little from the corners of her mouth, trying not to be embarrassed. Do you think you can sleep some more? You really should. It surprised Zhu to note that she was in fact feeling exhausted. Hadn't she been asleep for a few days? But Liz's suggestion actually sounded really good right now. Yeah, I think I can, she said. Okay, we'll be just outside if you need anything. Call if you need anything. Zhu promised that she would and settled back onto her pillow. Liz fussed gently in making sure she was properly tucked in, then bade her good night and left, leaving the door open. That left only the ceiling in the dim light, had one thought as you fell asleep. I'm home. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, 1st day, AV. Byron Group head offices, Omaha, Nebraska, USA, Earth. Kevin Jenkins. My God, what happened? Kevin could see why the question was being whispered. Moses Byron, who was always the picture of smiling confidence and vitality, looked stressed, pale even. Rather than strutting into the room in his usual blustering style, he more shuffled, thoughtfully. Did somebody die? Shh. Byron took a moment to survey the crew of BGEV-8, assorted board members and department heads, and cleared his throat. Been a development, he croaked, and cleared his throat again. This planning session is cancelled. I'll let you know personally when we reschedule. For now, he coughed. Rachel, recall Jev 9 and Jev 10. Tell them under no circumstances are they to use their jump drives. They've got to come back the old-fashioned way. Mr. Byron, that'll take them months, somebody protested. Moses held up his hand. I know, I ain't changed my mind. Oh, and, Trevor, some fine folks will be along later today to take a good look at your department. Give them full access to everything, and I mean everything, including Project Offending. Nobody said a word. They just exchanged bewildered and slightly scared expressions. Finally, Byron spoke again, looking at Kevin. Everybody whose name isn't Kevin Jenkins, go find something to do. I don't care what it is, go home early if you want. Go on. People practically fled. Based on the little chat I just had with the halls of power in this great nation of ours, Byron began, once the last door was closed, it seems I need to hire me a no-man. Somebody who, if I've got 50 people kissing my ass and telling me we're golden, if I look at you and you shake your head, we bury that idea and never speak of it again. Sound like something you can do? Does this thing come with a salary? Kevin asked. He judged it correctly. Byron laughed. Ha! And an office, he said. Though if half the things I hear about your cooking are true, I might include attending to the comestibles on your list of duties. I could be persuaded to take a job like that. Good, good. Byron cleared his throat again. We dodged a bullet, but this much, he confided, holding up 2 narrowly spaced fingers for illustration. Dodged at least 2 by my count, Kevin agreed. Yeah. I'll see you in the office tomorrow. You got a place to stay? HR already got my hotel room sorted out, Kevin told him. Guess I better see them about somewhere more permanent, huh? You do that, Byron agreed. He shook Kevin's hand and wandered out of the room, clearly still deep in thought. Kevin's mission pay had already been sorted out, and thanks to the miracle of modern digital banking, calling and paying for a taxi were effectively the same thing. He'd planned on leaving there forever. He distinctly remembered how the word had felt as he spoke it. Forever. Not for 5 years, not until something better came along, forever. Get himself out of his estranged daughter's life and never look back. It was the first time he'd even thought of her in years, and he ambled through the hotel lobby and into the elevator in a pensive mood, only shaking himself back into the here and now as the doors opened with a chime. He was about to swipe his phone to open the door lock when a thought occurred to him. Experimentally, he knocked on his own hotel room door. Come in. The room was unlocked, and Special Agent Williams was sitting in the large comfortable chair by the window, putting down a tablet. Well done, she added. You have good instincts. Save it, Kevin muttered, and sat on his bed. Look, Williams... Ah! She raised a finger. Small note and tradecraft for you. Williams is a cover name. Professionally, and to you, I go by Darcy. Special Agent Darcy, if you want to be formal. Darcy, huh? That a fake name too? If it was, why would I tell you? She smiled again. I would have introduced myself as Darcy if you hadn't dug up Williams to say hello. Pardon me for spoiling your entrance, Kevin deadpanned. So what, are you offering me a job as well? I am, she agreed. Though I suspect the title won't be as impressive as whatever it is Byron's calling your new role. Comestible attendant. Either Darcy's professional facade genuinely did slip for a moment, or else she was by a league the most flawless liar Kevin had ever met. Ha! She giggled, and raised her hand to cover her mouth. Oh, that's good, I like that. So what would my job be? Kevin asked her, deciding he probably had got through to the rule woman under the Company Act, whoever she was, and allowing himself a satisfied smile. Oh, exactly the same as you're doing for Moses Byron. Veto any ideas of his that strike you as unwise. You'll need... well... She hefted a light black satchel from beside her chair and handed it to him. Inside was a brand new Samsung tablet, still in its box, and some kind of a black device to attach to it. What's the box do? Kevin asked. Encryption, decryption, secure communications, Darcy shrugged. Don't plug it into any device other than that tablet. What'll it do, explode? No, it just won't work, but it would still technically be a felony. Communication with what? Kevin pressed. A secure server, Darcy said, full of briefings and reports and documents that you'll need to read, though I suspect that a lot of what's in there won't come as that much of a surprise to you. Kevin nodded. Just 2 more questions. Darcy sat back and delicately crossed her legs. Shoot. 1, why me? I ain't exactly the model of ambitious patriotism, you know. 10 years ago, you drove up to the front gates of Scurf carrying the kind of intelligence we were absolutely starving for, Darcy told him. You've clearly got something that does the job of ambition, even if it's just that you'd rather not get nuked from orbit. Certainly you're smart enough to know that as a real possibility, and you've taken active steps, potentially at risk to your own liberty in person, to combat it. She inclined her head. Now would you say that somebody like that wasn't worth our time? Kevin frowned and didn't answer. What's your second question? Darcy prompted him, eventually. Does this thing come with a salary? Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, 1st day, AV. HMS Shaman, HMMB Folkfer. Folkfer, Planet Simbrine, the far reaches. John Burgess. Whoa, hey. I thought you were gone for the day, man. Adam just shrugged and hung his light bag by the door. I took a day, got to sort out some things, get my head right, but you know me, I'm gonna be doing shit to think right, you hear me? I hear ya, John agreed. I was gonna lift. Nuh-uh, we're wrestling, now. 50 seconds later, the mat was grinding painfully against John's face, and his arm felt like he was 1 newton of force at most from dislocating. So, Adam shifted his posture just a little bit, while John's feet scrambled ineffectually for purchase. Let's talk about how you kept my cheating ex's secret for her, brother. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, 5th day, AV. Folkfer, Planet Simbrine, the far reaches. Ava Rios. Ready? No. They're calling. I know, I just... Ava took one last look. It would have been nice to think of Folkfer as a home, but there wasn't. Not anymore. Not really. It was all white buildings and parks and streets now. There were cars. There was the beginning of a rail network to connect to the outlying farms and villages. There was a thriving street or two full of shops. There was a supermarket. There were paved roads, advertisements, the neon green cross of a pharmacy. It was a town now. It wasn't the Folkfer she lived in. She could remember little wooden chalets tucked between the native trees. She could remember being happy in a place that might have been here, but wasn't here. She could remember. But that's all it was. Memory. I'm ready. Charlotte and Ben waved Sally to her from beyond the glass. She'd already said goodbye to Gabe and Adam. She wasn't surprised he hadn't come. Jess had work. Hedy had left Simbrine years ago. She presented her passport, stepped through the security arch, shuffled into place on the jumper raised deck alongside Sean, and fidgeted, as the last few people did otherwise. The gate was closed. There was a short countdown and she was on Earth. The Earth end of the Byron Group's commercial jump array was Hamburg Airport, and Ava could sense being on a different planet, even if the architecture hadn't suddenly and confusedly changed without so much as a flicker. Folkfer's municipal gravity generator might have exactly duplicated Earth's gravity, but it couldn't duplicate the heavy richness of the air. It was like coming down from mountaintop to sea level. It was warmer, denser, more oxygenated and more humid. Earth was a hot planet by galactic standards, and doomed to get hotter despite the rapid 180 in carbon dioxide production over the last 8 years. She could taste and smell that fact in every breath. So, Hamburg. She hoisted her bag. Beside her, Sean snapped the drag handle up from his and kicked it over into his hand. Yep. Are we flying back to London? That's cheapest, Sean agreed. How cheap? 50 quid each. Good. They passed through another security arch. I can afford that. I won't hear of it, Sean told her. You're going to need that money. But you're going to need a job. That means buses and the tube and maybe a taxi or two. So keep your money and use it. You can pay me back once you're earning. You can afford that? She asked. I've been writing articles for a bunch of different news sites and blogs, working part-time at Spoons. Sean shrugged. I can afford it, just. I was probably going to wind up looking for a lodger anyway. Rent in London being what it is, I'd have made a fuck of a lot too. But I mean, money's less important than helping you get on your feet. Touched. Ava managed to smile for him. Besides, Sean added, I've got something coming up. My Uncle Simon gets back from Angola next week. If he follows through on what he was talking about in his emails, maybe you and me, we could land on our feet. What's he doing in Angola? Covering the election for Reuters. I still got that offer from Byron Group, Ava noted, glancing at the corporate advertising for the jump array. Earth and Simbrine, photographed from orbit and connected by a line that cycled through all the classic, vivid, fiber-optic colours with the tagline, One Small Step. Moses Byron talks a good game, Sean agreed. Hell, it seems like he walks his talk too. I'm just not... I don't know. Do you trust anybody who got that big that quickly? Ava shrugged. People like his whole ethics and integrity brand. Even if it's just an act for the camera, he's playing that part to the hilt. Is that the same thing as actually being ethical, though? Sean, Ava sighed. Don't ask me about morals and stuff right now. I don't feel qualified. He inclined his head slightly, assessing her mood, then nodded and laid his hand gently on her upper back for just a second. Okay. Neither of them said a word to the other for nearly an hour after that, by which point they had boarded their plane, taken off and reached cruising altitude. He'd been looking out of the window for most of the time. Are we okay? He asked. Ava had been using the plane's Wi-Fi to check our website. She put the tablet down when he spoke and gave the question some thought. You're my very best friend, Sean. Isn't that enough? I don't think I've got more than that to give. He nodded and gave her a hug. I'm sorry, Ava. You didn't do anything. No, I did. I got selfish and... Sean shrugged. I pushed. You didn't hurt me, Sean, Ava reassured him. I hurt myself. And I helped. Yeah, well... You can stop helping me hurt myself by letting me take the blame for this, okay? She told him. This whole thing has been a lesson, and I want to learn it, not foist off the responsibility on somebody else. It was her turn to give him a reassuring squeeze. You learn your lesson, and I'll learn mine, okay? Sean nodded despondently, aware that lesson he was going to have to learn was the one he wished he didn't have to. Okay. He looked out the window again. That makes sense. Date point. 10th year, 2nd month, 2nd week, 6th day, AV. Uncharted system, deep space. Show up. There we go. It seems we escaped. Vedrick allowed a mingled pulse of relief and release anxiety to highlight his body. A human would have shuddered. I detest stasis, he declared. Death or life from the moment of a button press. Thank you for sparing us any anticipation. Kirk dropped his lower right hand, the prosthetic one, off the escape pod's control panel and gave a pleased nod. And we have indeed arrived at our destination. Good, he announced. Their destination, as far as Vedrick could tell, was a system in the middle of nowhere, some 5 years' travel time from the final resting place of the Starship Sanctuary, at the meager 10 kilolights that was their escape pod's top speed. Without the stasis field, they would have starved to death before completing even a fraction of the journey, and theirs was one of the largest, fastest, and best-equipped life pods in their late ship stable. Most of the others had been much smaller, cruder, and slower. As it was. Both of them glanced in the corner, and mutually decided not to discuss the Deathworlder in the room. Lewis had come scrambling into their escape pod seconds before Kirk had sealed it, babbling about Sanctuary's poor living area taking a bad hit, and separating him from the others. He was now slumped against the wall, with his arms on his knees, and his forehead resting against them. The escape pod sensors had reported that all other life rafts had launched alongside theirs, moments before Amir had suicidally rammed and destroyed a hierarchy dreadnought. Despite Lewis pleading and weeping at the console for nearly an hour, however, there had been no response from any of them. He'd finally given up and sunk despondently to the deck, scooted into the corner, and gone very still and quiet. Humans were almost as expressive as sometimes. Some of their emotions played out across their whole bodies. Vedrick could hardly blame him. Subjectively, scant seconds had passed since Lewis had given up on his friends, pointing out that, as far as the rest of the galaxy was concerned, they had been dead for 5 years, and would have been both unhelpful and tactless. Lewis had every right to grieve. On the other hand, was much more difficult to fathom without a translator. By the standards of pretty much every other sapient lifeform, including their evolutionary cousins, the Vuzlug, Kirk's species were renowned for reserved emotions, impenetrable body language, and inscrutable expressions. But if the way Kirk paused upon glancing at Lewis and then patted the grieving human awkwardly on the shoulder was any indication, he was feeling the loss just as intensely. Kirk had always been stoic, even by Rookra standards, however. He turned back to the controls and indicated them to Vedrick. You see? Vedrick scrutinized the sensor's readings. That, he noted, with a swish of accusatory maroon, is one of the 2 system defense force fields stolen from a secure military facility of my people. The other of which now protects Simbreen, I believe. Yes. Kirk did not seem to be at all contrite. I do not approve of theft. Vedrick chastised him. Would you have given permission if I had asked for them? No. Then theft was the only option. Kirk tapped some commands and spoke something untranslated in his native tongue. A sound like a handful of gravel being tossed down a staircase. I beg your pardon? Vedrick asked him. Kirk just made a satisfied nod and then carefully enunciated the stream of rattling domain syllables into the comms console. The system force field deactivated. No sooner had their pod crossed the threshold of wherever it had once been, than it popped back up, with barely a Guvernag's body length of clearance spearing the rear end of their escape pod. Kirk clearly wanted to take no chances with anything hostile following them in. Kirk nodded and turned the translator back on. Excellent. Dude. Lewis raised his head. There wasn't even Kirk's line. What? Both of them looked at him. He said, I have been and will always be your friend. You speak Domain? Kirk asked, aghast. No, I understand Domain. Lewis hauled himself upright. I couldn't speak Domain if you cut my throat. Where are we? How do you understand Domain? Kirk demanded. Dude, I spent months on the same ship as you. I studied it. But you shouldn't be able to understand it, Kirk protested. It's a language, isn't it? Lewis shrugged. Fuck, I can't pronounce Welsh either, but I could learn that just fine if I wanted. Now where are we, and why is it so goddamn important that you quote Spock of the force field? Kirk stared at him for a bit, then creaked a prolonged Rookra throat clear, and called up the system navigation display, as the life raft boosted up the 2 lights and headed inwards. This system has no official name, and I'm not sharing its coordinates as much as I trust the both of you, he said. Officially, it's unexplored. And unofficially? I explored it. Lewis frowned at him. Dude, when did you have time? It's more or less directly between Supply Station Haven in the Dark and Nightmare, but no space lane passes through here. At Century's kind of speeds, going cross-country meant having to stop to ground the hull charge almost at every system, and this one has an appropriate gas giant. So why are we here? Vedrick interjected, shading himself to indicate curiosity. I found something. What did you find? I found out what happened to Morocco Station. Vedrick glowed a cocktail, a surprise royal blue and solemn green, but Lewis just gave them both a confused frown. Dude, not everyone in this boat is up to speed on galactic everything, he told them. What's Milwaukee Station and what's happened to it? Milwaukee was a criminal research outpost on the Liverian frontier, Kirk explained. That's a cluster of stars in the extreme, well, up. That is perpendicular to the galactic plane, in the direction conventionally... I know what up means, dude, Lewis snapped. What happened to it? It vanished. And turned up here? Yes. So we're gonna dock there. Kirk hesitated. Yes. How do you do that? Vedrick objected. How do you jump to accurate conclusions so quickly? All humans do it. It's infuriating. Lewis frowned at him, with his mouth slightly open. How do you not? He countered. I mean, why the fuck else would we be here? To take a selfie? We aren't Deathworlders, Kirk pointed out. But you still got a working fucking thinker, Lewis exclaimed, nonplussed. Don't give me the ancient evolution life or death bullshit, whatever. I'd expect anyone to see that one coming unless the only thing their brain's for is holding up their fucking hat. The 2 non-humans looked at one another. Then Kirk, with an air of extreme delicacy, cleared his throat again. Lewis, are you okay? Lewis's laugh had an incredulous note to it. Are you Dude, are you forgetting the bit where our friends got killed? Because that has harshed my mellow a tiny fucking bit. He pinched his fingertips together, a half-inch apart, and peered through the gap to emphasize the point. All shouting at us bring them back? Kirk asked. What? Well, no. Then what good does it do? Kirk folded all 4 of his arms. So, what, you're not even going to give the 4 of them any more than, a minute's consideration? Lewis asked. Lewis. Goddamn herd Xenos, man. Fuck. The human spun away into the back of the pod, slumped against the wall, rubbed his face, and then barked an order at the pod. Privacy field. It snapped on in a fuzz of white noise and mercifully obscured him from view. Kurt sagged, shook his head back and forth in a long, slow swaying arc, and then double-checked the navigation. Do you have any thoughts on how to help him? Frederick asked, not sure what colour he should be, and so settled on a kaleidoscope melange of concern, alarm, empathy, fear, and many more. There is one simple trick to helping any human, old friend, Kirk murmured, guiding their lifeboat out of warp. There was what had once been a space station below them, half embedded in the surface of a tiny irregular lumpen moon that was much too small to have pulled itself into a sphere under its own gravity. The station was broken open, missing power to half its decks, eviscerated from where it had crashed into the surface of the rocky object, but still largely intact. And that is? Frederick asked. Maruki Station. I meant, and the simple trick is? Kirk ordered the lifeboat to dock with the station's one remaining powered bay, and turned to face him. You give them the means to fight back.